Out of nowhere, a blonde nobleman coldly dumps Cornelia Carnan right then and there, saying they just aren't a good match, while calling off their engagement. After that shocking announcement, a horse-drawn carriage travels down a quiet, cobblestone street under the lampposts. Inside the carriage, Cornelia looks completely worried, wondering if it was really okay for her to leave in the middle of the party like that. But her father gently reassures her, saying she is in no state to be at a celebration, and that even the king and queen agreed she should go home. Her mother leans forward to comfort her too, firmly reminding her that none of this is her fault. Her father chips in again, telling her she has absolutely nothing to worry about since she was the one who got dumped so unfairly. Hearing their incredibly kind words, Cornelia smiles gently and sincerely thanks both her father and mother. Her mother then realizes that the Lester family wasn't present at the ball tonight, and Cornelia immediately thinks of a girl named Lynette. Looking out the carriage window into the rain, Cornelia wonders if Lynette is still feeling sick, which prompts her mother to suggest sending a get-well gift if she doesn't get better soon. Once they arrive back at the estate under the bright full moon, Cornelia's maid tries her best to comfort her, telling her not to let the broken engagement get her down. As the maid carefully brushes Cornelia's long hair, Cornelia reassures her that she is doing just fine and was really only caught off guard by how fast everything happened. She explains that she never really knew Lord Leonhard well anyway, since they only ever had very basic small talk, and she actually spoke far more with the king and queen. As Cornelia continues getting ready for bed, her maid reminds her that the king and queen actually have really high expectations for her as well. In fact, she whispers happily that the king often says the entire country will be totally safe and secure if Cornelia becomes the queen. Hearing this, Cornelia can't help but smile, feeling deeply grateful that the royal family is looking out for her like that. She even remembers that when Lord Leonhard claimed they weren't a good match, the king got so protective that he actually yelled at him. Lynette gets super angry, clenching her fists and wondering how anyone could dare say Cornelia is not a good match. Seeing her maid catch fire like this, Cornelia can only sweat drop and silently remind herself with a gentle smile that, well, he actually is the prince. Since Cornelia has absolutely nothing planned for tomorrow, Hilda sets down her brush and says she will wake her up a little later than usual. Cornelia agrees that sounds like a great plan, wishing Hilda a good night as she gets ready to turn in. With a quick bow, Hilda gently closes the bedroom door behind her and tells Cornelia to get some rest. But as Cornelia lies down, she cannot stop thinking about the prince, wondering why he would choose a public venue to announce their broken engagement. She pulls the blanket close, knowing this mess could easily ruin his own reputation and even strip him of his right to the throne. Clutching her chest in the dark, she closes her eyes, completely baffled as to why he would ever say such a thing. Lord Leonhard is the first prince, which means he is the one expected to carry the heavy burden of leading the entire nation on his shoulders. Meanwhile, the other nobles quietly gossip among themselves, whispering that the prince's talent to be the next king is actually a bit lacking. On top of that, his younger brother, the second prince Lord Martis, actually has more than enough talent and looks highly capable. Even though law says the eldest son must inherit the throne, everyone knows the country would be just fine if Lord Leonhard had a great partner and his brother to support him. That is exactly what everyone around Cornelia Carnan thinks, which put a lot of pressure on her to be that perfect supporting partner. So, as a duke's daughter, Cornelia Carnan has worked super hard every single day, mastering her studies and completing tough training just to be ready to rule by his side. All Cornelia ever wanted was to look perfect and be ready to support the next king as his queen. But as she lies in bed, she cannot help but feel crushed that all her years of hard work were just thrown away like they meant nothing. Still, she closes her eyes and tries to stay strong, telling herself she will only focus on helping the next rightful ruler. The next morning, her close personal maid, Hilda, pulls open the curtains and warmly wishes her a good morning. Hilda smiles brightly and mentions how much she is looking forward to the big evening party tonight. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, Cornelia is completely confused when Hilda asks if she is excited to see Lord Leonhard again after all this time. Cornelia is completely lost, realizing she was not supposed to have any plans today, and wonders why this conversation is even happening. Later, words reach Cornelia that the daughter of the Leicester family has been acting really strangely. At the family dining table, a couple of ladies discuss how worrying it is that someone named Lynette is having issues. Cornelia is suddenly caught completely off guard when the topic turns to something happening tonight. Seeing her shocked face, her mother asks if something is wrong, prompting Cornelia to quickly apologize and claim she is just a bit sleepy. Her mother then smiles and mentions tonight's big evening party, leaving Cornelia even more confused about what is going on. Cornelia's mother happily smiles and asks her daughter to help her choose which necklace to wear later. Trying to stay calm, Cornelia asks her mother if she is thinking about the one with the red jewel. Her mother is completely surprised, wondering how Cornelia could have possibly guessed she was choosing between the silver-bordered and gold-bordered ones. This completely shocks Cornelia, and she starts sweating as she wonders if she accidentally let that slip out loud. She pieces together her memories of yesterday's dinner and quickly pardons herself from the table, saying she needs to go rest up for tonight's party. Confused by the bizarre repetition of events, Cornelia decides to go check today's date with several other people to find out what is really going on. She realizes that everyone else remembers the date of the evening party as being yesterday, which means only her own memory has reset. This means today is somehow the exact same day that already ended, and Cornelia starts to panic, wondering if she is the only person who remembers the alternate timeline. The scene then shifts to the royal palace itself, shining brightly under the full moon as the giant evening party begins. Cornelia stands there in her beautiful party dress, dressed up and feeling deeply uneasy about the impossible situation. She thinks back to earlier that afternoon when she visited her mother's room, where her mother picked a gold-bordered necklace based on her advice in a direct replay of yesterday's events. Looking around at the bustling crowd, Cornelia feels completely lost and frustrated, unable to comprehend how they could possibly be holding this party all over again. Just as Cornelia is processing the shock, she hears a man's voice suddenly call out her full name. Seeing him stand there, she instantly realizes what is about to happen, knowing his next words all too well. Right on cue, Leonhard looks straight at her and says they are not a good match, declaring that their engagement is officially annulled. Cornelia can only stand there in complete shock, barely able to process hearing those fateful words all over again. The sudden realization of what this means hits her hard, and she quickly covers her mouth as her heart races with dread. But before Leonhard can say another word to her, his father, the king, angrily yells from behind, demanding to know what kind of nonsense the prince is talking about. The king is absolutely livid, shouting at his son for deciding they are not a good match, while Prince Leonhard desperately begs his father to wait. The king snaps that he cannot believe the prince would say something so foolish in public and drags him away by the collar. Cornelia watches in utter shock, calling out Prince Leonhard's name while her worried mother holds her back. Cornelia desperately tries to pull away from her mother to go speak with Lord Leonhard, but her mother tells her to calm down and leave the matter to her father instead. As they are walked out, the prince tries to stutter out an excuse, but his father is clearly not listening to any of it. Left behind in the quiet hall, Cornelia touches her chin in deep thought, completely baffled by what this all means for her loop. Cornelia remembers how cold Prince Leonhard was just yesterday, when he didn't care about her at all and calmly ended their engagement. But this time, even though he said the exact same words, his face was completely different and he looked super worried. Cornelia clutches her chest, wondering if Prince Leonhard might actually know something about the time loop, and she decides she has to go see him first thing tomorrow. So when the morning comes, Cornelia tells her maid, Hilda, that she needs to head over to the royal palace right away. But Hilda smiles warmly, completely unaware of the time loop, and excitedly says she is really looking forward to the evening party tonight. Hilda also points out that it has been quite a while since Cornelia last saw Prince Leonhard, leaving her mistress sitting in quiet thought. During her carriage ride, Cornelia is so incredibly tense that she tightly squeezes her own dress, trying to calm her racing heart. As soon as she arrives at the Grand Palace, she immediately demands to know where Prince Leonhard is. Seeing the palace staff completely taken aback by her sudden visit, Cornelia suddenly realizes this is actually the very first time she has ever personally visited him. But right then, Prince Leonhard runs up to her, admitting that he was actually just about to head over to her family's house as well. They both look at each other in surprise, and Cornelia stumbles over her words, trying to bring up what happened yesterday, or rather, today. Once they sit down in private, Prince Leonhard doesn't waste any time and asks her point blank if she is repeating today too. Cornelia is completely shocked and gasps, realizing that Prince Leonhard is stuck in the exact same loop as her. She gets super emotional and vents about how she kept hearing the exact same thing for the last 3 days, with everyone insisting the big evening party is happening tonight. Cornelia keeps pushing through her tears, saying that absolutely nobody else recalls what has happened so far, even though the loop really should have ended already. Hearing these words makes Cornelia suddenly gasp in surprise as she tries to process everything. Holding up 3 fingers, the prince calmly explains that he has already lived through this very day 3 times as well, meaning this is his 3rd round. He admits that he is in the same boat and still trying to figure it all out, so he suggests they sit down and compare notes on what they both know. Cornelia is completely stunned, realizing they are both on their 3rd loop as she asks him if he is really going through the exact same thing. Prince Leonhard explains that from what he checked yesterday and this morning, she is the only one who seems to know about the time loop, and asks if anyone in the Karnan family has noticed. Cornelia thinks about it nervously, admitting she is pretty sure she is the only one in her household who remembers everything. Prince Leonhard listens quietly, smiling softly as he says he understands and is just super glad he is not going through this alone anymore. The two sit together in the quiet room, and Prince Leonhard points out that there still might be other people stuck in the loop with them, which Cornelia realizes makes perfect sense. Because of this, he decides he is going to keep a close eye out for anyone acting strangely at the evening party tonight. Looking closely at the room, Cornelia wonders if there might be someone else who reacts differently to the time loops, just like she and her helper did yesterday. Because of this, he wants Cornelia to skip the evening party tonight, which completely catches her by surprise. He catches himself and corrects his wording, explaining that it makes more sense to call it the previous loop rather than yesterday. He notes that while their conversation changed and made them realize they were both looping, he still ended up calling off their engagement and leaving, meaning the general flow of events remained unchanged. Cornelia agrees completely, remembering how she tried to follow him, but was quickly stopped and taken out to the garden by her mother. She realizes that even though they made small changes here and there, the overall outcome of the night still ended up being exactly the same. To really shake things up, Prince Leonhard decides he is going to spend the whole evening party without saying a single word about their engagement, hoping this major change will finally break the loop. Cornelia loves the plan and happily agrees to help out by pretending to be sick so she can stay home from the party. But Prince Leonhard still looks incredibly serious, muttering about how frustrating it is that, of all the days they could be repeating, it just had to be today. With that thought in mind, she conjures a magical glowing hourglass while praying to change her fate. This makes Cornelia pause and ask if he is talking about the incident with the tomato soup. Prince Leonhard looks even gloomier as he confirms that is exactly why today is the worst day to have repeating over and over. Prince Leonhard holds his hands together and reveals that he has actually been forced to drink that awful, hated tomato soup 3 times now. He gets super worked up, explaining how he keeps missing his chance to complain, so when he wakes up, breakfast is already served and he just has to force it down. Cornelia looks on in disbelief as the prince explains that even if he asks for a different meal for the next day, the time loop just wipes out his request anyway. Cornelia has to hold back a giggle over his silly struggle, prompting a super serious Prince Leonhard to snap that he is not joking around. She bursts out laughing anyway, teasing him for treating a simple bowl of tomato soup like a literal matter of life and death when they have a giant time loop to solve. But Prince Leonhard just sits there, looking totally defeated, insisting that to him, avoiding that soup really is a matter of life and death. Cornelia giggles, saying she knows it must be tough on him, but it really is just tomato soup, and she cannot help but laugh when he takes it so seriously. Prince Leonhard clears his throat to get back on track, saying that despite the soup drama, he wants to fix this time loop as fast as possible. For their first move, he asks her to fake being sick so she can skip tonight's party, urging her to play along even if it gets tough, which she understands and curtsies, while telling him to take care too. Then, Prince Leonhard smiles and promises that once tomorrow finally comes, his very next move will be to visit the Karnan estate. They both stand together, holding on to that plan in case the day resets, and they end up right back here again. Sure enough, the loop resets, and a lady in a fancy dress stands by the window, welcoming Cornelia back yet again. To test out their new plan, Cornelia gathers her courage and tells her mother she is not feeling well and wants to skip the party tonight. Her mother immediately gets worried and asks if she is okay, admitting that Cornelia has been acting a little bit off since this morning. To keep her family out of danger, Cornelia put on a bright smile and told her mother that she would be perfectly fine after getting some rest, wishing them a great time at the party. She gets a bit distracted, though, and glances over at something else in the room. She notices her mother is choosing between 2 lovely necklaces, and her mother asks which one she thinks looks better. Cornelia suggests the gold trim because she thinks it will look absolutely perfect with her mother's beautiful blonde hair, and her mother happily agrees to go with it. Her mother smiles warmly, thanking Cornelia and complimenting her beautiful blonde hair. Based on how they are acting, Cornelia realizes that she is indeed the only one inside the mansion trapped in this repeating loop. A bit later, she sits down to rest with some tea while her parents leave for the special evening party without her. While Cornelia takes a sip of her tea, the maid suddenly asks her if she has heard about the incident that happened earlier that morning. The maid explains that the whole town is talking about a robber who showed up in the northern forest. Cornelia gasps in shock as the maid adds that a young guard lost his life trying to protect his master inside a carriage. Cornelia is completely shocked and holds her teacup, realizing she never heard a single thing about this scary forest attack during the previous timeline. Suddenly, a knock sounds at the door, and someone calls out to ask if Cornelia is still awake or already asleep. Sitting in bed with a book, Cornelia looks up in surprise and asks if it is her mother. Sure enough, her mother and her father, the Duke, peek inside, prompting Cornelia to ask what is wrong and why they are already back from the evening party. Her parents walk into her room, explaining they came back early because they were all so worried about her, adding that even the king and queen were asking after Cornelia. But before they can talk any further, another knock sounds at the door, and Hilda apologetically calls out to interrupt their quiet evening together. Hilda walks in and lets Cornelia know that Lord Leonhardt has just arrived. Stepping outside into the gardens, Lord Leonhardt notices her and thanks her for waiting. He immediately apologizes for dropping by so suddenly, but Cornelia gently reassures him that it is totally fine. He admits he actually thought about waiting until tomorrow, but then he brings up a heavy truth, saying he has no idea if tomorrow will even come. Because of that, he wanted to make sure he told her what was on his mind while he still has the chance, which makes Cornelia smile and thank him for coming all this way. Hearing her sweet response, Lord Leonhardt flashes a bright, happy smile and tells her not to worry about it at all. Lord Leonhardt mentions that tonight's party actually went really smoothly because he behaved himself, so nothing crazy happened. Later on, someone points out that her parents actually left early anyway because they were just too worried about her to enjoy themselves. Cornelia looks thoughtful and realizes they actually came home at the exact same time as they did during the previous repeating nights. This makes Lord Leonhardt realize that they aren't actually repeating the exact same sequence of events every single time. Cornelia adds that while their own personal choices have changed how her parents and Hilda react, everything else still feels like the same repeating day. But Lord Leonhardt stops her, explaining that other random things are changing on their own too, like a robber suddenly showing up in the northern forest early this morning. Cornelia looks really worried as she mentions she already heard the terrible news about a carriage getting attacked and a guard losing his life. But Lord Leonhardt explains that he didn't hear a single thing about a robber showing up during his last two loops, making this completely new. He points out that as a prince, any major trouble nearby gets reported to him right away, and back then, he was doing the exact same things as before. Since he got absolutely zero reports back then, they have to assume this robbery is a totally new event that only happened in this current loop. Cornelia gets even more anxious and asks him whose carriage actually got targeted by the thief. He reveals it was the Rastons family carriage, and while the Marquis and his wife made it out safely, a young guard named Hugo Emmelt unfortunately died defending them. Lord Leonhardt points out that even though the incident is tragic, it proves their loops are changing, so he plans to send guards to the forest in the morning to stop any future attacks. Cornelia immediately smiles and offers the support of her own family if he needs extra men to help out. Lord Leonhardt happily accepts her offer, saying he will absolutely count on her assistance. Since the night is wrapping up, Lord Leonhardt decides to head out, promising to get back in touch first thing in the morning. But as he leaves under the night sky, they both can only hope that they will actually make it to tomorrow morning without another loop starting. Sure enough, the next morning arrives peacefully, and Lord Leonhardt greets Cornelia while casually sipping on some tea. Cornelia is super happy to see that her guest has finally arrived, warmly greeting him as she walks in. Lord Leonhardt immediately apologizes for keeping her waiting, but Cornelia quickly insists it is her own fault for not setting a specific time in the first place. Since they are finally together, Lord Leonhardt kindly offers to wait if she still needs to eat breakfast, but Cornelia admits she is too anxious to have an appetite anyway. As they sit down for tea, Lord Leonhardt reassures her by sharing that he sent guards to the northern forest the second he woke up, so they should be safe from attacks now. He then mentions his next major move, revealing that he plans to check in on some acquaintances and look for any strange behavior among their servants before tonight's party. Excited to help, Cornelia decides she will visit the friends she could not meet at the party last time, while also trying her best to remember any small details from the previous loops. Cornelia isn't quite sure if she can write everything down to leave a proper record of what she learns, but she is still determined to try. Lord Leonhardt agrees and promises to seek her out again at the evening party, while telling her not to hesitate to call him if anything goes wrong, adding that he won't bring up their engagement this time. Cornelia happily says she understands, mentioning that if it looks like they have to leave the party early, she will do her best to keep her parents there to buy some time. Lord Leonhardt appreciates her help, but then adds that since they still have no idea when this time loop is going to end, he has one more piece of practical advice to share. While thinking of Lord Leonhardt's safety, she gets a warm reminder that she really needs to take care of herself and keep her own strength up too. Leonhardt jokingly advises Cornelia to make sure she eats properly so she doesn't end up too hungry to function at the party, which makes Cornelia smile and completely agree. Realizing she has a plan, Cornelia smiles and says she will head off to the royal palace now, even cheekily deciding to ask them to add tomato soup to tonight's menu. Leonhardt is completely shocked, seriously wondering if changing the menu could somehow alter the timeline, but Cornelia just giggles and tells him she was only joking. The two of them wrap up their meeting, promising to see each other later tonight. Soon, night falls, and the grand palace is lit up beautifully under a bright full moon. This marks Cornelia's fourth time looping back to the day, and her third time attending this exact party, where the rich families are having the same conversations as always. Cornelia just smiles politely, noting that she has heard these same chats so many times, she is about to memorize them word for word. Just as Cornelia is getting bored of the repetitive conversations, Lord Leonhardt spots her and asks if she has a moment to talk. The two of them slip away from the busy crowd and head out to a quiet balcony overlooking the starry night sky. Once they are alone, Lord Leonhardt brings up the Rastons family to fill her in on their latest status. He explains that instead of going through the northern forest, they took a completely different route to the capital, and since their family head is already at the party, Cornelia assumes they made it safely. Cornelia starts piecing things together and realizes that they were actually ambushed right before making it to the royal capital. His expression darkens as he shares the grim report that several attackers jumped them, and one of their guards was even stabbed and needs medical attention. Cornelia is completely shocked when she hears that the injured guard is Hugo Emmert, realizing with horror that the exact same person has been targeted once again. Since they avoided the forest bandits this time, Cornelia panics and asks if it is just bound to happen to him anyway, while Lord Leonhardt tries his best to calm her down. Trying to keep her focus, Cornelia pulls herself together and asks about Hugo's current condition. Leonhardt looks down sadly, explaining that things do not look very good because Hugo was stabbed deeply in several places. He adds that, because Hugo has protected the Rastons family for a long time like a son, the couple is totally depressed, meaning Leonhardt could not ask them for more details. But on the bright side, he mentions Hugo is at least getting treatment right now, so there is still a chance he will make a full recovery. Leonhardt agrees, pointing out that even though they are stuck in a loop, things are definitely starting to play out differently, so Cornelia asks him to keep looking for any new changes. As they finish talking, she looks up at him with a bit of surprise in her eyes, wondering what he is going to say next. He gives her a warm, gentle smile, and reminds her that since they are still engaged today, she should at least let him walk her back. Cornelia feels a little strange being escorted by him, but she accepts, and he happily agrees to take her back to where her friends are waiting. When the others see them walking together, they are totally amazed, gushing about how perfect and beautiful they look side by side. But despite all the lovely compliments from the crowd, Cornelia just stands there holding her glass, looking incredibly quiet and lost in her own worried thoughts. Seeing how out of it she is, the brown-haired nobleman steps up and asks Cornelia if she's all right. He mentions that she looks really unwell and asks if they should just head home, but Cornelia tries to play it down, saying she's only a little tired. But then she's surprised to hear that Lord Leonhardt was actually the one who noticed and suggested they leave early for her sake. She looks over at Lord Leonhardt, who is busy talking with several other guests across the room. He turns back to look at her, offering a warm, reassuring smile. Remembering how he smoothly promised to meet up with her tonight, Cornelia smiles softly and quietly realizes just how thoughtful he's being. Late at night, the sound of a decorative fountain splashing fills the quiet garden outside the venue. Lord Leonhardt walks up to Cornelia and asks if she managed to find out anything useful at the evening party. Cornelia looks down sadly and admits that, while she successfully refused her father's demand to go straight home earlier, she is not sure if any of it actually changed anything. But Lord Leonhardt tells her that, on his end, he discovered the Rastons family had a massive territory dispute going on, which catches her completely off guard. He goes on to explain that the northern territory they govern currently does not have any decided successor. Because the family has no direct heir and very few relatives, he warns her that there are actually quite a few people aiming for that top spot. Cornelia is stunned to hear that the major attack was likely set up from the shadows by someone who totally disagreed with the couple. Lord Leonhardt looks really worried and hesitates to keep going, but he knows he has to share the rest of the truth. The moment he mentions Hugo Emmert's name, Cornelia is completely shocked and gasps, covering her mouth in pure panic. She feels like she is completely losing her mind, not knowing what she is supposed to do next with all this scary information. Crying out in frustration, she wishes she could just forget everything like everyone else, because if her efforts change nothing, at least she wouldn't have to carry this heavy worry. Seeing her break down, Lord Leonhardt quickly grabs her by the shoulders to comfort her, calling out her name to snap her out of it. Lord Leonhardt looks her right in the eyes and says he knows this is painful and terrifying, but he begs her not to let her spirit break. He gently holds Cornelia's shoulders, telling her she does not have to worry about a thing because he will handle the hard parts, so she shouldn't give up hope. After a quiet moment, Cornelia softly apologizes for losing her cool, but Lord Leonhardt quickly insists he is the one who should say sorry for reaching out and touching her so suddenly. He then smiles and suggests that if they get stuck in the exact same day again, they should just go ahead and do whatever they want next time, which leaves Cornelia completely stunned. He reasons that if the day resets, whoever does what they want wins, but Cornelia immediately worries about what might happen if the loop suddenly stops and tomorrow actually comes. Lord Leonhardt just cheerfully tells her she can blame him for everything, saying she can just tell everyone he threatened to break off their engagement, and they will surely believe her. Lord Leonhardt keeps things lighthearted, joking that even if the loop finally ends, they can just spend their brand new today tidying up whatever mess they made yesterday. Cornelia looks a little uncertain, admitting that she doesn't actually mind doing that, but she still seems a bit hesitant. Seeing she is on board, Lord Leonhardt grins and happily says that it is a done deal then. He then reassures her that he will make sure to set up proper security for the Raston's family, so she can stop carrying all this worry on her shoulders. With their plans settled, they decide to wrap up their talk under the dim light of the street lamp. But as Cornelia walks away, she can't help but feel guilty, thinking she is supposed to be supporting the king, but instead, Lord Leonhardt is the one constantly taking care of her. Standing under the bright full moon, Cornelia thinks back to his advice and wonders what she should actually do to spend her time exactly as she wants. Her mind wanders to a lovely high tea, imagining herself tiny enough to sit right inside an elegant flower-patterned teacup surrounded by delicious treats. When the loop resets, everything during the day goes exactly as she remembers, but she still makes sure to spend her time doing whatever she wants. Or at least, that is what she plans to do. Back at the nightly party, Lord Leonhardt is curious about how she spent her reset and asks her what she got up to today. Cornelia gives him a bright, happy smile, saying she feels like she spent her day in a really meaningful way. She then turns the question back on him, and Lord Leonhardt shares that he spent his early afternoon practicing his swordsmanship. Trying to lighten the mood, Cornelia playfully asks him if he likes swordsmanship, but Leonhardt just crosses his arms and instantly grumpily says he hates it. Cornelia is totally taken aback by his blunt response and asks him if he really dislikes it that much. He gets super worked up and explains that while he is not a fan of the training itself, he absolutely hates his instructor more than anything. It turns out the teacher is always comparing him to his younger brother Martis and trying to make him feel small by asking if he's frustrated to be lagging behind. So to teach him a lesson, Lord Leonhardt challenged the instructor to a duel today, knowing the man would start talking about Martis again and leave himself wide open. Just as planned, he swept the instructor's legs, knocked him flat on the ground, and landed a punch right then and there. From there, it turned into a total messy brawl, and since he was up against the Royal Palace's own special sword instructor, Lord Leonhardt ended up losing the fight. Hearing this crazy story, Cornelia looks really worried and immediately asks him if he got hurt. Lord Leonhardt just smiles brightly and tells her he's totally fine, adding that the instructor was actually holding back and even praised him when it was over. He then mentions that his father was apparently super angry about the whole thing, but since he's already planning to announce their broken engagement to her tonight anyway, he happily shrugs and jokes that throwing a little punch at his instructor is really no big deal compared to a broken engagement. But as Cornelia listens to him laugh it off, she just looks down with a quiet, sad expression, unable to say a word. He then mentions that in the end, he just couldn't bring himself to leave his tomato soup behind at breakfast. He admits he was originally planning to stand up and loudly say that he has always hated tomato soup, but seeing how happy his mother looked drinking it and thinking about the hard-working kitchen staff, he just couldn't bring himself to say a single word. Cornelia looks at him softly and mutters how sweet he is for holding back, even though he hated the soup so much. Seeing how he always put others first, Cornelia sadly reflects that she probably should have done more of the things she wanted to do too. Hearing this, Lord Leonhardt turns to her and asks if she didn't want to read a book, which she has to admit is true. Cornelia looks up with a sad, gentle smile and admits she is starting to feel like there was something else she really should have been doing with her life. Hearing this, Lord Leonhardt grins warmly and suggests they should pick a different day during their loops to just do whatever they please. As they continue walking together under the starry night sky, he suggests doing this every 5th loop, meaning their very next chance is actually tonight, since this is their 10th time. He knows that focusing only on the loop can be really depressing, so thinking about what they actually want to do should help cheer her up a bit. Lord Leonhardt closes his eyes and happily reassures her that since they have this rare chance, Cornelia should try doing something she has never done before. Amused by his sweet idea, Cornelia smiles and eagerly says that she will be the one to surprise him tonight. Lord Leonhardt seems pretty surprised and asks if she really wants to focus on him today, to which Cornelia happily says yes. He admits that is totally unexpected, rubbing his chin as he tries to process her surprising choice. But with a big, bright smile, he tells her he is really looking forward to seeing what she has planned. Checking his pocket watch, he points out that they should head back to the party soon, since it is almost time to announce their broken engagement. Cornelia looks a bit down as she repeats the words, feeling the heavy weight of another broken engagement looming over them. Lord Leonhardt suggests they skip the escort this tonight and walk back separately, and Cornelia softly agrees that it is probably for the best. Cornelia agrees to his plan and smiles, telling him she understands and that he can go on ahead while she calls out to him later. Walking alone down the path, she cannot help but think how anyone would be in a terrible mood if they knew their engagement was about to be broken. But as soon as she steps back inside the building, some other noble women catch sight of her and call out her name. The young women immediately ask where Lord Leonhardt is, and Cornelia awkwardly explains that they had some quiet circumstances to deal with. The noblewomen are completely shocked by this, saying it is way too much for him to not escort her, which Cornelia notes is totally different from how things went down last time. Even though they are just worried about her, Cornelia looks at them and cannot help but feel a little uneasy about how much things are changing. Suddenly, someone calls out Cornelia's full name, catching her completely off guard. She turns around only to hear those exact same painful words, as he tells her they aren't a good match and that he's breaking off their engagement. Cornelia remembers how the first time she heard those words, she wasn't even sad, just totally surprised and confused, responding in a complete daze. But this time around is different, and she yells for him to wait. Cornelia's sudden outburst makes Lord Leonhard look over in absolute shock, with an older man next to him looking just as stunned. Placing her hand over her chest, Cornelia boldly calls out Lord Leonhardt's name, preparing to make her move. Instead of backing down, Cornelia demands to know if she has some kind of shortcoming that makes him want to call things off. This completely catches Lord Leonhardt off guard, and he quickly says there is no way she has any flaws like that. So Cornelia pushes further and asks if there is actually someone else he wants to be with instead, but the king steps in and says that is not it either. Lord Leonhard simply tells her that they are just not a good match, and leaves it at that as Cornelia stands there in silence. With that final cold answer, the men turn their backs on her and walk out of the ballroom. The scene then shifts to the quiet mansion under the night sky, where someone is wishing Hilda a peaceful night of sleep. After waking up back in her room again, Cornelia realizes that almost everything is exactly the same as in the previous loops. Later on, as Hilda brushes Cornelia's hair, Cornelia thinks about how the only difference this time was Hilda bringing up the second prince, Martis, who apparently would never say such a thing. Later on, Cornelia spots Lord Leonhard standing behind some metal bars with a lit lantern, and he smiles, happy that she noticed him. She quickly apologizes for making him wait in a place like this, but he tries to reassure her, saying there is absolutely no need to apologize. He admits with an awkward smile that he can't exactly ask the guards to let him through the front gates right after breaking off their engagement. As they stand together near the fence, he sets down his warm lantern and asks Cornelia if she is really sure it was okay for her to slip outside to meet him. In the quiet of the night, Cornelia slips out to the garden, telling the guards she just needed a little walk because she couldn't sleep, but she knows she has to make this meeting quick. She meets with her contact in secret, who immediately asks if anything at all has changed since the big announcement. They both recall how Lord Leonhardt coldly insisted they just aren't a good match, claiming there was absolutely no other reason behind it. But Cornelia still has so many doubts, wondering if there really is more to his sudden decision than he is letting on. Seeing her so lost in thought behind the garden gate, Lord Leonhardt notices her and asks what's wrong, but she quickly plays it off and steers the conversation back to how today is repeating. She explains that even though everyone treated her differently right after Lord Leonhardt broke things off, something still feels incredibly off about this loop. Cornelia starts by pointing out that, in the end, everything played out exactly the same as the previous times they lived through this day. Lord Leonhard agrees, admitting it was no different for him, and that his father and Martis had plenty to say to him afterward. But after all that lecturing, his father simply ordered him back to his room and left it at that. Cornelia takes this in and immediately asks him about the Rustons family to see if anything changed on their end. Lord Leonhard explains that in this particular loop, the Rustons couple didn't actually attend the evening party, even though they have arrived in the royal capital. He goes on to say they apparently left their own lands, traveled through the northern forest, and stayed at a friend's estate in the capital before heading to the party with them. Cornelia processed this info, realizing that the Rustons didn't check into an inn like they usually do, and instead headed straight to an acquaintance place. Leonhard points out that his sources already tracked them down, and since they plan to stay there for a few days, they must have some pretty close ties to the owner. But there's a catch, because he mentions that the wife actually ended up getting hit with some major travel sickness from the long carriage journey. Because of that, they sent a message saying they wouldn't make it to tonight's party and would visit later, making Cornelia hope that Hugo Emmert is safe as well. But seeing Leonhard go completely quiet with a really worried look on his face, she gets super nervous and asks him if something bad actually happened to Hugo. Leonhard explains that Hugo was indeed invited to the very same estate, but apparently, someone caught him off guard and attacked him in the stables. Cornelia is completely shocked by the news and gasps, wondering out loud who could possibly do something so awful. Leonhard admits he is not sure, because by the time the guard was found, the attacker had already fled, and strangely, nothing was stolen from the estate. He points out how incredibly suspicious it is for an attacker who snuck onto a noble's estate to go out of their way just to assault a guard. He adds that it is highly likely Hugo was the actual target of the attack, which only leaves Cornelia even more confused and worried. But Leonhard explains that from what he has gathered, Hugo has a great personality and no family scandals, so there is no obvious reason for anyone to hold a grudge against him. This makes Cornelia wonder if it was just a case of mistaken identity or some sort of misunderstanding, but Leonhard tells her he simply doesn't know. Leonhard points out that everything they know about Hugo is just gossip from outsiders, meaning they have way too little time to judge, especially since he can't go around asking the Rustons family for the details. Cornelia listens silently, worrying that even though they might learn a bit more when tomorrow comes, there are still too many unknowns. She gets so lost in her own head that she jumps a little when she suddenly hears Leonhard calling her name. Looking concerned from behind the cell bars, Leonhard asks if she is all right, and Cornelia quickly tries to reassure him. She apologizes with an embarrassed smile, admitting she completely spaced out while he was talking. Leonhard is super understanding, telling her it really can't be helped given the crazy situation they are in. Leonhard shares his plan, saying that when the next loop begins, he is thinking of sending guards to the Rustons family and then visiting their closest estate immediately. He reckons he might even be able to greet them as soon as they arrive, so Cornelia suggests that she will try going out into the city next time. She explains that the attack on the Rustons family carriage by robbers was huge news that everyone in town was talking about. She figures she might pick up different rumors in the city than what circulates among rich families, and agrees to meet Leonhard next at the evening party. Before riding off, Leonhard tells Cornelia to please be careful since they have no idea what might happen, though he really hopes they find some useful clues. After he leaves, Cornelia heads back inside, where she is warmly greeted by a guard standing watch and a maid of the estate. Inside, Cornelia runs into the head maid, Hilda, and wonders how she already knew she had snuck out. Hilda just smiles warmly, welcoming her back without any judgment. Cornelia feels a bit guilty and apologizes for startling her, explaining she just couldn't sleep and went out to get some fresh night air. Seeing she is still restless, Hilda kindly offers to whip up some warm lemonade, which Cornelia happily accepts. But then, Cornelia asks her to serve it in her specific floral morning teacup, leaving the head maid pretty confused by the sudden request. Cornelia sheepishly explains she is reading a book where the characters drink lemonade from a cup just like that, and she simply wanted to try it out herself. Hilda giggles warmly and points out that Cornelia still does the same little things she used to do as a child, promising to bring her the drink right away. A bit later, Cornelia sits quietly by the window in her bedroom, gently blowing on her warm drink to cool it down. She stares off deeply in thought, realizing that if the day resets all over again, tonight's entire tragedy will completely vanish like it never happened. She grips her cup tightly as she remembers poor Hugo getting stabbed, thinking a new loop could save his life, though she worries they might repeat the exact same mistakes if they don't learn from this run. While staring at the beautiful floral design on her cup, Cornelia wonders if there is even any point in looping again without a real solution, even though she is desperately hoping for a second chance. But out of nowhere, her favorite teacup suddenly slips from her hands and shatters into pieces on the floor. Cornelia looks down at the broken pieces on the floor, wondering what will actually happen if she winds up returning to the morning of this very same day. She picks up a piece of the shattered teacup, thinking that under a reset, the fact that she broke it would simply be gone, just like Hugo's tragic death would have never happened. But out of nowhere, she suddenly flinches and winces in pain as a sharp edge cuts her hand. She looks down and sees blood dripping slowly from her cut finger, realizing that this fresh injury is part of the current reality too. If a new day comes, she realizes she will have to tell Hilda about the broken cup, but if time resets, the cut won't just heal. The fact that she ever got hurt would completely disappear. Wrapping her finger, she thinks about how she would also have to explain this bandage to anyone who asks, unless she can turn back time. First thing in the morning, Hilda opens the curtains to let the sunlight in and warmly greets Cornelia. She smiles brightly and mentions how much she is looking forward to the big evening party tonight. Hilda then points out that it has been quite a while since Cornelia last saw Lord Leonhard. Looking at her perfectly healed hand, Cornelia realizes that she is indeed still trapped inside the time loop. Meanwhile, the young Lord Leonhard is seen riding his white horse at full speed through the countryside. Cornelia explains that today is her 6th loop, so she headed out into the city with Hilda, whose amazing popularity and connections helped them easily gather the information they needed. However, the peace doesn't last long, and night quickly falls over the grand castle. Cornelia looks completely lost in thought as she quietly looks down with a sad face. While they sit together on a couch, Lord Leonhard asks if something happened, and Cornelia explains how she broke a cup last night after they parted ways, and even tried cutting her own finger with a shard. Lord Leonhard is shocked to hear she cut her finger, but she calmly explains that she only did it to test what would happen if she personally got hurt. She holds her teacup and reveals that when the day reset, that cut had completely disappeared. Hearing this, Lord Leonhard sadly realizes that their bodies and actions are also trapped in this endless loop. But Cornelia gets a wild idea and says that knowing their injuries will just heal overnight is actually super convenient, since it means they can afford to be a little reckless. Hearing this, Cornelia immediately panics, begging him not to do anything so incredibly dangerous. She gets super worried and asks what would happen if tomorrow actually comes and the time loop finally ends, leaving them with real injuries. Seeing how upset she is, Lord Leonhard quickly smiles and tells her not to worry, saying he was only joking and doesn't actually plan on doing anything wild. Cornelia is relieved to hear it was just a joke, and Lord Leonhard then changes the subject to share his own progress, explaining that earlier today he visited the family close with the Rustons. He reveals that the family showed him the cabin in question, but absolutely everything was back to normal, with no traces of the incident and no memories of what happened. To make matters more confusing, Leonhard explains that the people at that house suddenly told him they would be absent from the evening banquet and cut their chat short. Right after that, he decided to look directly into the Rustons' family to see what else he could find. He learned there might be a dispute over their territory, but because Hugo Emmert is just a guard with no connection to the family's land or leadership, Leonhard still has no idea why he was targeted. Hearing his side, Cornelia shares that she also went out into the city with Hilda, hoping to get some useful information from someone who knows a lot of people. She discovered that Lynette Leicester rode away on a horse early in the morning and hasn't come back, making Leonhard wonder about the Leicester family. While that's pretty worrying on its own, Cornelia points out that during her very first run of today, she originally heard that Lynette was just feeling sick. Leonhard looks closely at Cornelia and asks her if she is absolutely sure about the information she found. He then reveals that the family with the closest ties to the Rustons is none other than the Leicester family, explaining that the childless Rustons couple treats Lynette like their own daughter, to the point where they might even let her inherit their title and lands. Cornelia is completely shocked, realizing that Lynette was actually right in the middle of the Rustons family's land dispute this whole time. She holds her head in frustration, wishing she had just remembered all of these crucial pieces from the very beginning. Leonhard tries to comfort her by saying there is no use worrying about what she forgot, and suggests they head back to the venue soon. As they walk back together, Cornelia can't help but wonder why Lynette left the estate in the first place, questioning if her feeling unwell actually meant she was acting strangely. She regrets not paying closer attention to her own mother's words back then, frustrated that she can't organize her thoughts or remember the crucial things she needs to, wondering if Lynette has been in this state ever since the very first loop. But as she overthinks, all the sounds of her surroundings and even Leonhard's voice start to slip away completely. She thinks back to when the engagement cancellation was announced at the evening banquet, remembering how absolutely nothing changed after that moment. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the quiet night, firmly stating that they would absolutely never do such a thing. It turns out Leonhard is just teasing her, admitting he didn't expect such a calm, weak reaction to an engagement cancellation, while a nervous Cornelia quickly explains she had so much on her mind, she just couldn't react in time. Leonhard jokingly tells Cornelia that next time he cancels their engagement, she might as well just laugh at him and walk away with her mother, leaving Cornelia completely speechless behind the gate. Ready to gather more clues, Cornelia excitedly pumps her fists and begs her to tell her exactly what happened after the banquet ended. Looking a bit nervous, Leonhard admits that he actually stopped by the Leicester estate before coming over. He explains that given how crazy everything was, his initial plan was to just watch quietly from a distance without saying a word. But it was just too painful to watch as Lynette's mother nearly collapsed from grief, sobbing about her missing daughter while her husband desperately tried to hold her up. On top of all that, things were already super tense at the Leicester estate because of whatever Hugo Emmert did, leaving Cornelia wondering if he was involved too. He explains that right before making it to the capital, the horse pulling the Rustons family's carriage suddenly went out of control, and it looks like Hugo, who was riding up ahead, got completely caught up in the chaos. Even though he was still breathing when they first brought him to the Leicester estate, he had already passed away by the time Leonhard stopped by that night. Hearing this, Cornelia desperately wishes that Lynette would at least come back, but Leonhard admits they just can't say for sure what will happen. He tells her that the moment he heard the news from her, he had the royal palace send out a search party, but they haven't found a single trace of her yet, so he plans to personally check the shops in the city that stay open late. Cornelia immediately begs to go with him, but he quickly cuts her off, saying there is no way he can take her out into the city at night. While Cornelia remains frantic and tries to argue, she can't help but hesitate as he gently asks her to trust him and leave everything in his hands, knowing just how worried she is. Knowing she cannot change his mind, Cornelia reluctantly nods and goes along with the plan. Leonhard gets ready to head out on his horse, promising that he will contact her right away if they find Lynette, and even if they do not, he will come back to explain everything the next morning. As he looks back at her near the gate, he begs her to just go back inside and rest quietly for her own safety, while she worries and tells him to be super careful. Leonhard then smiles and says that if she is planning on doing anything dangerous, she has to let him handle it and tell him beforehand. Cornelia is a bit confused by this, but Leonhard reminds her about how she broke a cup earlier and cut her finger, showing just how much he worries about her getting hurt. She gets a bit embarrassed and insists it was really just a tiny scratch, smiling at how protective he is being. Leonhard looks a little sad and tells her that, even so, trying to help search for her friend is about all he can really do for her right now. Cornelia can only stand there in complete shock, softly calling out Leonhard's name as she watches him leave. To lighten the heavy mood, Leonhard jokingly complains about his soup from this morning, but Cornelia playfully calls him out, asking if he just wanted an excuse to skip the tomato soup he hates. Laughing because she caught him, Leonhard gets back onto his horse and bids her goodbye as he prepares to ride out. Once he is gone, Cornelia stays behind and starts thinking hard, trying to figure out why Lynette would suddenly hop on a horse and ride away on her own. She remembers meeting Lynette at a tea party where her friend talked about being great at embroidery, but actually seemed shocked when someone else brought up horseback riding as a hobby. She starts wondering where Lynette could have possibly learned to ride a horse, especially since nobody was fast enough to catch up to her. Staring out at the mansion in the dark, she gets a wild idea and thinks that the next time the day resets, she should try riding a horse herself to understand Lynette just a little bit better. The next morning, her personal maid Hilda greets her warmly and mentions that Cornelia must be super excited about the big banquet happening tonight. While Hilda points out it has been quite a while since Cornelia last saw Leonhard, Cornelia changes the subject and says she wants to visit the library right after breakfast. Hilda nods and politely offers to arrange a comfortable carriage ride for her trip, but Cornelia flashes a big smile and surprises her maid, saying she actually wants to ride a horse to the library today instead. Hilda completely panics as soon as she sees Cornelia sitting frozen on a horse, immediately shouting for the staff to get a carriage ready instead. Cornelia is so stiff she can barely move, but the stable hand tries to cheer her up by explaining that she will easily get the hang of it after a few tries. When Cornelia asks how many times she needs to ride to get used to it, the stable hand smiles and says she could probably do it in a month if she practices every single day. Realizing how tough it actually is, Cornelia smiles and thanks him, apologizing for suddenly demanding to ride a horse out of nowhere. The stable hand holds up a fist to encourage her, telling her not to worry at all, because she will improve really fast if she starts practicing tomorrow. He then starts rambling on and on about how a short daily practice of just an hour or two is much better for body memory than wasting a whole single day, leaving Cornelia totally overwhelmed. The stable hand continues chatting away, mentioning that because today was so sudden, he just picked a horse that was already ready, but tomorrow, he promises to select a friendly one that matches Cornelia perfectly. He cheerfully pumps his fist and urges her to do her best, which makes Cornelia smile nervously and reply that she will be in his care. Just then, Hilda comes over to announce that Lord Leonhard has just arrived back at the estate. Leonhard meets with Cornelia and sadly explains that he searched all the shops and inns around the city, but he could not find Lynette anywhere. Later on, Leonhard meets up with Cornelia in a lavish room and admits he completely failed to find Lynette, feeling terrible that he could not even figure out where she went. He is completely baffled as to why she left the mansion in the first place, adding that according to the Lesters, she just made a strange noise and jumped straight onto a horse, leaving them with no clues to make a guess. Cornelia looks thoughtful and points out that it actually seems pretty strange for Lynette to ride a horse in the first place. She explains that she heard Lynette's main hobby was embroidery, so she never pictured her as the type of person who would go horseback riding. Leonhard agrees that it does sound really strange when she puts it that way, admitting he does not remember much about Lynette either, but definitely cannot picture her riding a horse. Cornelia then mentions that she actually tried getting on a horse herself before he arrived, which completely surprises Leonhard and makes him ask if she really got on all by herself. She quickly explains that she had the coachman come along to help, but even then, she was so nervous that she could not move at all. She adds that from what she has heard, it takes at least a month of practicing every single day to be able to ride freely, which makes Leonhard look at her and ask what is wrong. Cornelia looks completely stressed out, realizing she got swept up by the coachman's high energy and somehow agreed to practice her riding every single morning. Leonhard can only stare at her in total disbelief while she panics in the background, wondering how she is going to survive tomorrow. He starts cracking up, which only makes Cornelia pout and tell him it is rude to laugh at what is practically a life-and-death crisis for her. Leonhard quickly apologizes with a smile, but points out that taking on new challenges is actually a great thing to do. He mentions that, since he has been riding ever since he was a little kid, the whole concept of traveling somewhere alone on a horse just felt totally normal to him. Hearing his side of things, Cornelia lets out a soft sigh, clears her throat, and decides she will just have to go through with it. Leonhard suggests that checking the Royal Palace archives might be a better idea than the regular library to find similar cases from the past. Since the archives normally need an application to enter, he offers to go with her so they can look into it together and make things much faster. Then, Leonhard brings up Cornelia's morning horseback riding practice and asks a pretty interesting question about how they can use the loop. He points out that only the two of them keep their memories, while everyone else will completely forget what happens if they return to today again tomorrow. Cornelia agrees with that, so Leonhard explains that even though no one else will remember her practicing inside the loop, her skills will still get better. In other words, by the time she rides for real, she will be able to handle the horse with total ease, making it look like she suddenly mastered it out of nowhere. Leonhard gets a huge kick out of this idea, smiling as he points out how shocked and confused everyone will be when she suddenly rides like a pro out of nowhere. Cornelia isn't quite as amused by his scheme, sighing and telling him he shouldn't find so much entertainment in other people's struggles. But Leonhard just smiles, saying that looking at it this way makes the time loops feel like a meaningful chance to actually learn something new. He adds with a huge grin that to the rest of the world, it will look like they managed to master a difficult skill in a single day. Hearing this, Cornelia decides to playfully turn the tables on him, laughing as she suggests he try learning how to cook tomato soup himself. Cornelia tries to lighten the mood with a warm smile, pointing out that mimicking the classic Royal Palace recipe will definitely surprise everyone and make the Queen super happy. Leonhard asks Cornelia if they should head over to the Royal Palace soon, since digging through all that research might take a while. He also mentions he already sent some guards to check on the Rustons family and Lynette, hoping they might grab some useful information while Cornelia goes to get herself ready. Agreeing with his plan, Cornelia thinks that practicing in the time loop is actually perfect because nobody will have any idea what they are up to, making it the perfect time to start something completely unexpected. But wait, once they are at the palace archives, a young noble named Lord Martis bumps into them and is completely baffled, asking Cornelia what on earth is going on today. Cornelia bows politely and apologizes for not greeting him sooner, explaining that she and Leonhard are just doing some research, though Lord Martis tells her not to worry about it. But then, Cornelia asks her brother about the research he is doing with Leonhard, since only the two of them from yesterday should even know about it anyway. Leonhard quickly comes up with a cover story, explaining that he asked Cornelia to help him look into the Northern Territory. He then makes a guess of his own, asking Lord Martis if those grounds are actually causing him some trouble right now. Lord Martis is surprised by the question and wonders if Leonhard is referring to the Rustons family from that area, asking if his brother already knows something about them. He admits he doesn't have all the details, only having heard rumors that the family is struggling because they haven't chosen a successor yet. Lord Martis kindly offers to help them search, but Leonhard declines, saying that he and Cornelia can handle it for now and will ask if anything else comes up. Lord Martis accepts this without any issues and says goodbye, telling them he will see them later at the evening party. Leonhard praises his brother Martis, noting that he already has a great grasp on the problems happening in the Northern Territory. Then, looking back at when this whole time loop first started, Leonhard admits he used to think someone who deeply adores Martis might have caused it. Hearing this completely surprises Cornelia, and she repeats the idea of someone adoring Lord Martis being behind everything. Cornelia's brother points out that Martis isn't engaged to anyone right now and guesses he doesn't even have a significant other, but he wonders if there is actually a woman out there who secretly loves Martis. Even if that were true, Cornelia is still really confused and wonders why that would cause a loop in the first place. Leonhard points out that if he cancels his engagement to Cornelia, the right to the throne goes to Martis, meaning Cornelia would then be engaged to Martis instead, which would make Martis's admirers lose all hope. Cornelia looks completely stunned by this realization as the pieces finally start to fit together. Leonhard points out that Martis is super oblivious to his own popularity, meaning a woman who secretly loves him might do anything to keep another woman from marrying him. So to test this, Leonhard tried to stop the annulment of their engagement during some of the loops. He deliberately avoided mentioning the annulment during the third and fourth loops, and everyone around them even started talking about how great they looked together. But when morning arrived and nothing changed, he figured that theory was a bust, admitting he really should have filled Cornelia in sooner. Hearing this, Cornelia asks him not to apologize, but she cannot help but wonder if he called off the wedding and gave up his right to the throne simply because he hated the idea of marrying her that much. Leonhard notices her worried look and processes what is going on, gently asking Cornelia if she is doing okay. Cornelia quickly brushes it off, saying she is totally fine, which makes him sigh with relief. He smiles warmly and reminds her not to push herself too hard, especially since he still plans to announce their annulment at the party tonight. He reasons that Martis is bound to be completely lost, especially since they were doing research together all day, only to annul the engagement that very night without showing any signs of it beforehand. Leonhard admits he has never seen his brother look confused before and jokes about what kind of face he might make, while Cornelia softly giggles and agrees. But thinking about his brother's reaction suddenly makes Leonhard look incredibly nervous, breaking out into a cold sweat. Cornelia looks at him with a gentle, slightly concerned smile, noticing that he is looking a little worn out. Leonhard admits he is tired, explaining that ever since they crossed paths earlier in the day, his brother Martis chased him all the way to his room, totally losing his cool. He gets really worked up, saying it is only natural for a younger brother to be angry at his older sibling's foolishness after breaking things off so suddenly, leaving Cornelia sweating as she quietly thanks him for his hard work. But that is not the only thing weighing on his mind tonight. Leonhard's expression turns serious as he drops the real bombshell. The Rastons family completely missed the evening party, never even showed up in the capital, and still cannot be found anywhere. Hearing this unsettling news, Cornelia holds her chin in deep thought, realizing that things are getting way more complicated than they expected. Leonhard explains that they are positive the couple left their northern mansion and headed straight into the thick northern forest. They actually found some carriage wheel tracks in a muddy patch of the woods, but after that, the entire trail just went cold. Leonhard admits it would make sense if they just took a wrong turn, but getting absolutely zero updates from them by now is super weird, making Cornelia worry if Hugo Emmert was traveling with them. Leonhard confirms that the couple did bring Hugo along as their guard, so he has likely gone missing alongside them. Hearing this, Cornelia gets even more anxious and asks what in the world happened to Lynette. Leonhard tells her that, according to the castle guards, Lynette was seen screaming right in the middle of the road. Apparently, Lynette didn't stay on the road forever and eventually turned back to the Lester family mansion on her horse. Later, Cornelia listens intently as they discuss how he rode his horse so incredibly fast on his way there that it felt like he had completely drained his soul and left his own body behind. They start putting the pieces together, realizing that in the last loop, Lynette went missing, and now this time, it's the Rastons family who has vanished. Cornelia wonders out loud why bad things keep happening to both of their families. But Leonhard admits that since things change with every loop, all of this has to be connected. So Leonhard decides he is personally going to visit the Rastons family first thing in the morning when the next loop starts. Hearing this, a shocked Cornelia gasps, trying to process if Lord Leonhard actually went through all that himself. Leonhard explains that up until now, he only ever sent guards to handle things, but this time, he is going to personally tag along. He figures that by going himself, he will finally be able to make direct contact with Hugo as well. Hearing this, Cornelia thinks for a moment and decides she will head over to the Lester family to do some investigating of her own. She explains that since she has spoken with Lynette a few times, she is sure the Lester couple will let her in, and then she can ask her friends if they noticed anything strange lately. Leonhard warmly agrees to the plan and smiles, saying he will see her at the next evening party after the reset. Cornelia happily smiles back, agreeing that they will meet up at the evening party on their very next today. They wrap up their nighttime meeting with a warm goodnight under the full moon, waiting for the reset. The very next morning, a maid opens the curtains to wake Cornelia up, excitedly mentioning the big evening party happening tonight. Rubbing her eyes as she wakes up, Cornelia tells her maid she needs to head over to the Lester family right after breakfast and asks her to get a carriage ready. But then she smiles, suddenly deciding she wants to go out for a quick horse ride first. She heads outside her family's massive mansion on this bright, cloudy morning. But out of nowhere, Leonhard spots her and runs up with a super shocked face, asking her what on earth is going wrong. Apologizing for showing up so suddenly, Cornelia explains that she is here to return a book she borrowed from a woman named Lynette, leaving the young man outside quite surprised since he did not know they were close. With a bright smile, Cornelia says she was hunting for an old embroidery book that is totally out of print, and Lynette was nice enough to lend her a copy. The young man seems deeply troubled to hear this, quietly asking if that is really what happened. She gets a worried look on her face as she realizes that Lynette has also been acting super strange since this morning, making her suspect that her loyal maid might be caught up in things this time too. She asks him if Lynette has been doing things like speaking in an unknown language, which shocks him so much that he gasps and asks how she could possibly know about that. Caught off guard by his intense reaction, Cornelia quickly waves her hands and claims she only brought it up because she heard some random rumors. The nobleman is totally shocked, thinking the rumors must have already spread and wondering if someone saw his daughter out in public. Seeing how worried he is, Cornelia nervously asks if she can please see Lynette. He panics a bit and explains that his daughter really is not in any condition to speak to anyone right now. But then he stops, taking a moment to think it over. He gets a little hopeful and says that maybe, since Cornelia is her close friend, hearing her voice might actually get Lynette to respond. So he leads the way, warning Cornelia that she is about to see something pretty awful, but asks her to try calling out to his daughter anyway. Cornelia knows she needs to find any clue she can to break this loop, but she feels pretty bad about lying to Lynette's father when she doesn't really know his daughter at all. Deep down, she silently apologizes to Lynette for using her name like this to get inside. As they walk, Lynette's father explains that the Rastons family is visiting their place before heading to a party at the royal palace, and adds that Lynette was really looking forward to it. Looking incredibly startled, Cornelia suddenly asks if they are also heading to see Hugo Emmert. Lynette's father looks a bit surprised and asks if she heard about Hugo directly from Lynette. He then smiles and explains that Hugo is a really honest young man who has worked as a guard for the Rastons family for generations, coming to their house since he was just a kid. Lynette's father explains that Hugo is actually traveling here with the Rastons couple right now, but he pauses, looking sad as he realizes the poor guard is going to be absolutely heartbroken to hear about Lynette's death. Hearing this, Cornelia realizes that at this exact moment in the timeline, the Rastons family and Hugo are still completely safe and sound as they head straight for the Lester mansion. As the carriage speeds along, she realizes that while her own family made it through safely, almost no one else ever manages to reach the Lesters in this loop. Even when they do arrive safely, they end up getting attacked right at the Lester estate, and Hugo always ends up either losing his life or getting seriously hurt in the chaos. She looks down with a heavy heart, desperately wondering if there is any way she can save them all, including Lynette, before the next day comes. Suddenly, a sharp, shocking realization hits Cornelia like a bolt of lightning as she stands frozen in place. Hearing a sudden, loud noise, Cornelia gasps and asks Lynette's father if that sound was who she thinks it was, and he sadly confirms that it is indeed Lynette. He looks incredibly worried as he explains that she has been acting like this ever since morning, screaming constantly and desperately trying to break out of her room. Out in the hallway, several guards are standing watch by a door with her name on it, holding it shut and making sure all the windows are locked tight so she cannot escape. Hoping to get through to her, Cornelia asks if she can speak with Lynette alone, but her father looks very hesitant because of how dangerous the situation is. But Cornelia is determined to help, saying she will only talk to her through the closed door, so it will be perfectly safe if everyone just steps back a bit. Relieved by her plan, her father agrees and says he and the guards will wait at the end of the hallway, telling her to shout right away if anything goes wrong, which Cornelia warmly thanks him for. Standing right in front of the locked door, Cornelia takes a deep breath and introduces herself to Lynette, hoping to get a reaction. When she gets nothing but silence, she starts to raise her voice and begs her friend to just listen. She gets super emotional as she yells through the door, blurting out that she has been repeating this exact same day over and over again. She continues shouting, desperately explaining that this crazy loop might actually have something to do with Lynette herself. She promises Lynette that she will come back to visit again soon, really wishing they can at least talk a little bit when she does. Realizing she can do nothing more for now, Cornelia heads back down the hallway, where where Lynette's father sighs of disappointment and says he is so sorry she went out of her way to come all this distance. Cornelia looks super apologetic instead, saying she is the one who should feel bad for showing up so suddenly during such a stressful time. But Lynette's father holds out his hand and tells her not to worry at all, offering to keep a book for Lynette and let her know Cornelia brought it once she is feeling well enough to talk again. Cornelia takes a quiet moment to close her eyes and think things through. Then, she puts on a bright smile and says she would actually prefer to hand the book to Lynette herself, adding that she would love to have a real catch-up and talk about embroidery with her. Hearing this, Lynette's father looks incredibly relieved and sincerely thanks her for being so understanding. Cornelia then places a hand on her chest and promises to keep Lynette's current state a total secret, offering to help with anything else they might need. Cornelia steps up and kindly lets the family know that her own household is more than happy to help, so they should just reach out if they ever need anything. Lord Lester is incredibly grateful, smiling warmly as he thanks her for her sweet consideration. He then mentions that he is planning to leave Lynette in his wife's hands tonight so he can attend the evening party all by himself, which completely surprises Cornelia. He smiles and explains that he felt it was important for him to at least show his face and put in an appearance. But this gets Cornelia thinking, because even if it is only the head of the family, she wonders if anyone from the House of Lester has ever even gone to one of these parties before. As far as she can recall, not a single member of their family has ever actually shown up to the evening party in the past. A lady with long wavy hair holding a fan mentions how the Lester family didn't attend tonight's party, which makes Cornelia wonder if this exact conversation with her mother has happened in every single loop. Back then, she had no idea about their connection to the Rastons family and just ignored it as boring gossip. But now everything is starting to add up. She thinks back to how Lynette was actually super excited to go to the party, but she herself was just too distracted to notice any of it at the time. In fact, Cornelia realizes she barely even remembers anything about the evening party at all, looking so deeply lost in her thoughts that she seems completely tuned out. Seeing this, her mother nervously asks if she is okay, so Cornelia quickly snaps back to reality and claims she was just thinking about something. She puts on a sweet smile and lies that she was just trying to find Lord Leonhardt because she has something important she needs to talk to him about. Cornelia smiles and tells her mother she wants to greet him, so she's going off to look for him, leaving her mother standing there completely caught off guard. As Cornelia walks away into the crowd, her mother calls after her in surprise. She searches the busy room, excitedly calling out for Lord Leonhardt when she spots someone. But when the young man turns around, it's actually Lord Martis, who looks a bit flustered and immediately apologizes for the sudden meeting. Cornelia feels bad and says she's the one who should apologize because she was in a rush, but Lord Martis explains that his brother actually wants to speak with her. He goes on to explain that his brother didn't really want to attend the public party, so he is currently waiting in the back. Cornelia looks super worried and asks what happened to Lord Leonhardt in the back. Lord Martis walks with her and explains that early this morning, his brother left for the Northern Territory. He mentions there are some really bad rumors about the Rastons family, who rules that northern area, but something happened along the way. Hearing this, Cornelia gets even more anxious and quickly asks what happened to him on the road. Lord Martis delivers the terrible news, revealing that his brother was caught in a sudden rockfall. Cornelia gasps in pure shock, completely stunned by the awful news. Cornelia looks completely panicked and asks what happened to Lord Leonhardt, making Lord Martis quickly jump in to tell her to please not worry, because his brother is actually completely safe. Lord Martis explains that Leonhardt did end up injuring his arm, but thankfully, the doctor said it is minor and should fully heal in just a few days. Feeling a huge wave of relief, Cornelia catches her breath and slowly processes the news, realizing that if Leonhardt is safe, it means everything is going to be okay. Suddenly, Leonhardt calls out to Cornelia in a panic. Her eyes light up with tears of joy as she gasps out Lord Leonhardt's name, unable to believe he is actually standing right there. Lord Leonhardt gently asks Cornelia to calm down, while she looks at his arm in a sling and worries about the injury and the scary rockfall he just survived. Leonhardt thanks Martis, the blonde knight, for bringing her, and suggests they all head inside to the room right away. Inside, Cornelia sits on a sofa next to Lord Leonhardt, who has his arm in a sling, and explains that he headed for the Northern Territory first thing in the morning to find the Rastons family. Seeing him hurt, Cornelia softly tells Lord Leonhardt that he doesn't need to force himself to speak, since Martis already filled her in on everything. Leonhardt looks down with a sad expression and tells her that he is doing just fine, even though he is carrying his arm in a sling. With a serious look, Lord Leonhardt remembers heading out with his guards and recalls the moment they first spotted the Rastons family's carriage up ahead. On a dusty road, a couple of mounted guards look ahead as a horse carriage approaches from the distance. Lord Leonhardt explains that he noticed a man named Hugo Emmert riding ahead, seemingly leading the entire convoy. But then, just for an instant, the ground started to shake under their feet. One of the guards catches a glimpse of a familiar face hiding by the rocky cliffside, realizing with absolute certainty that his eyes just locked with Hugo. However, by the time Leonhardt and his guard realized what was happening, the terrible landslide had already buried Hugo and the carriage under a heap of rubble. Leonhardt pauses and apologizes, saying he hates talking about such a grim sight, but he remembers seeing Hugo's arm sticking out from a small gap in the rocks. Cornelia notices his voice is trembling, which makes her realize just how horrific the entire accident must have been. Seeing how shaken he is, Cornelia gently tries to comfort Lord Leonhardt, telling him it is okay now, and begging him not to force himself to speak or hurt himself anymore. Lord Leonhardt looks up with a soft smile and apologizes for making her worry, insisting that he is doing fine now. Cornelia is still really concerned and asks if his injuries are severe, but he quickly tries to brush it off, saying it is nothing to worry about. He reassuringly explains that the doctor simply went way overboard with the bandages to stop him from moving around too much, and besides, his injuries will be completely gone by tomorrow anyway. For a moment, he goes quiet, his eyes showing a deeper look of worry as he thinks things over. He then looks down, admitting there was always a chance things would turn out like this, and adds that he really should have considered the possibility of witnessing such a terrible thing, or even getting caught up in it himself. Leonhardt looks down and apologizes to Cornelia, murmuring that he wished Martis were the one retelling all of this instead of him. He sighs, admitted that Martis is much smarter and more resourceful, so he would have handled everything way better. But Cornelia isn't having it, and quickly shuts him down, asking him if he has any idea just how much his positive attitude has actually saved her. She gets super emotional, explaining that the only reason she can even think clearly and decide on her next steps is because he is right there by her side. She looks him straight in the eyes, repeating that it is all because he is the one she is actually spending this time with. Hearing her heartfelt words, Leonhardt is completely stunned and just stares back at her, speechless. Realizing how intense she just got, Cornelia instantly backtracks and nervously apologizes, saying she completely lost her cool for a second. But Leonhardt tells her not to apologize at all, insisting he is the one who should feel bad for losing his own composure and asking if he ended up hurting her. He then smiles warmly and points out that they actually had this exact same conversation before, only in reverse. Cornelia smiles back and remembers that it happened back during the fourth loop, thinking of the time she was the one crying while he stood by her. Looking at him sitting next to her, she realizes with regret that she never actually tried to truly understand Leonhardt, wondering how she ever expected to support him like that. She looks down, feeling she was way too full of herself just because she received a queen's education and everyone always praised her as the future queen. All of a sudden, a loud, startled gasp echoes through the quiet room. Leonhardt instantly grows worried and asks what that scream was, while Cornelia recognizes the voice and wonders who it could possibly be. Cornelia urges Leonhardt to go check out what is happening, and he immediately agrees to follow her. By the time they rush out, they see a girl in a simple white dress running through a crowd of onlookers. She gets really angry and demands to know why Lynette is showing up at the evening party. Leonhardt and Cornelia can only stand and watch as the girl runs through the open doors ahead of them. Out of nowhere, the angry girl points directly at Lynette, screaming to know why she is even allowed at this evening party. While people try to hold the angry girl back, a young man steps forward with deep concern, asking Lynette what on earth is wrong. Cornelia and Leonhardt can only watch in complete shock, completely lost as to what is happening right in front of them. Meanwhile, back inside, Cornelia is suddenly startled by a clattering noise that makes her jump back in fear, while Leonhardt holds her close to keep her safe. Cornelia is left totally stunned, looking after her, and wondering what is really going on with Lynette. Everyone in the hall stands frozen in silence, staring at the double doors long after the angry girl has run out. Because of that big scene, the whole evening party ends way earlier than scheduled, leaving Cornelia feeling incredibly unsettled and deep in thought under the moonlight. Sitting down with Leonhardt afterward, she wonders why Lynette even came to the party, noting that something like this has never happened before, and it is tough to figure out her goals in that frantic state. She remembers that while Lynette was at the venue, she was not actually looking at any of the guests standing around. Instead, her attention was completely focused on the area stretching from the middle of the hall all the way to the main exit. It really seemed like her eyes were moving and tracking something, almost as if she were chasing after someone or something invisible. Determined to get some real answers, Cornelia decides she is going to try visiting the Lester estate again when the next loop begins today. Leonhard points out that Cornelia is completely right, but she gently stops him and says he does not need to push himself if things get too painful. Leonhard looks determined and insists that he won't sit back, wanting to keep going despite the difficulty. Hearing this, Cornelia smiles warmly and offers to take care of everything on his behalf so he can relax without worrying about the time loop. She looks directly at him with a bright, encouraging expression and begs him not to give up hope. Leonhard can't help but smile, admitting that between the party and everything else, he feels like Cornelia is constantly saving him today. Cornelia assures him that it's perfectly fine, promising to support him just as much as he supports her so they can finally escape this endless loop together. Leonhard smiles warmly, thanking her and promising that he will go with her to the Lester estate when the time resets again. Cornelia begs him to get proper rest, but he gently tells her not to worry and promises he won't push himself too hard. Even with his assurance, Cornelia still looks quite worried about him. He reminds her that this next try marks their 9th day, meaning the day after will be their 10th, and they agreed to spend every 5th reset doing whatever they want. Leonhard points out that if he works hard just one more time, they can spend the next round completely free. He adds with a smile that he already knows exactly what he wants to do, and thinking about those plans helps motivate him to do his absolute best. Cornelia looks forward to their plans, teasingly adding that she has already decided on what she will do next, and that it might just surprise Lord Leonhard. When the next morning finally arrives, Cornelia spots Lord Leonhard waiting outside the estate and calls out his name. He turns around with a bright, cheerful wave and warmly wishes her a good morning. Cornelia immediately asks how his arm is doing, and Leonhard cheerfully moves it around, assuring her it feels perfectly fine and that any weird pain he felt when waking up is completely gone. Hearing that he is feeling so much better brings a bright, relieved smile to Cornelia's face. But then, Cornelia notices a gorgeous pocket watch being held out, commenting on just how lovely it is. Looking warmly at his pocket watch, Leonhard smiles and explains that his father actually had it custom made for him when he was born, matching it perfectly to his own hair and eye colors, which is why he is so fond of it. Hearing this sweet story, Cornelia smiles softly and agrees that it really is a wonderful special item. But as Leonhard keeps looking at the watch, his mood turns a bit serious, and he mentions that their current situation feels exactly like this timepiece, leaving Cornelia puzzled as she asks if he means it's like a clock. He points out that the hands of a clock just endlessly spin in circles, and no matter how many days go by, or which today or tomorrow they are currently living in, nothing ever truly changes. He goes on to say that once the hands complete one full rotation around the face, they just immediately start the next round, meaning it doesn't even matter how many total times they have spun. Understanding exactly what he means, Cornelia grows quiet and looks quite worried, realized that his pocket watch is indeed the perfect symbol for their endless time loops. Curious about how the time loop works, Cornelia asks Leonhard if he has ever tried staying awake throughout the whole night. Leonhard recalls that back when Lynette first went missing, he spent those late hours desperately searching and waiting for reports right up until midnight. He mentions that he wanted to see exactly what happens the very moment the entire day resets itself. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind always started slipping away about 5 minutes before midnight, leaving Cornelia surprised by this strange sleepiness. Leonhard then asks Cornelia if she ever tried checking this for herself, but she admits she was simply too anxious about repeating the same day, so she made sure to sleep normally. Hearing this, Leonhard pauses for a second and then smiles, teasing her gently about how carefully she follows the rules. Leonhard stops talking for a split second, and Cornelia immediately catches the weird pause and asks him if there is something else he wants to say. But Leonhard just crosses his arms and claims it is nothing, adding that he simply believes in keeping a normal, healthy routine no matter what is going on. Cornelia gets pretty annoyed and tells him that if he really wants to laugh at how careful she is, he should just go right ahead instead of holding it in. She gets so worked up that she finally yells at him to just let the laugh out already if he is struggling that much to hide it. Leonhard quickly backs and raises his hand, apologizing and asking her not to get so mad because her reaction was just super unexpected. Cornelia is still totally annoyed, frowning as she asks him what exactly he means by calling her reaction unexpected. Leonhard smiles and points out how Cornelia always stays so incredibly calm about everything. Cornelia is caught off guard, admitting she always pictured him as the type who could effortlessly make and carry out perfect plans in a crazy situation like this. Leonhard just chuckles and says, going to bed early to get some proper sleep is actually a really good thing, which makes Cornelia realize he has a point. He looks at her warmly and says he just didn't expect this side of her, but it actually makes him feel much closer to her now. With a gentle laugh, he tells Cornelia that the real her standing right here is so much easier to talk to than the girl he had imagined in his head, which sweetens the mood instantly. Cornelia completely agrees, happily telling Prince Leonhardt that he is also way more reliable and easier to talk to than the prince she had pictured before. Leonhardt smiles and points out how funny it is that even though they were engaged, they're only just now getting to know each other because of how crazy things have gotten. Hearing this, Cornelia realizes he is totally right, since they spent years in an engagement but never really shared anything more than basic polite greetings. She looks down, feeling a bit guilty that she had just assumed everything about him based on what other people in the kingdom said about the first prince. But seeing his bright smile makes her realize he is actually super positive, strong, and a genuinely kind person, and she can't believe it took a time loop for her to see that. Still, a sad thought hits her, because once tomorrow comes, their engagement is bound to be completely cancelled anyway. As they stand outside the grand mansion, Leonhardt notices her quiet worry and gently tells Cornelia that if she's feeling anxious, she can talk to him. They arrive at a set of large double doors, where a maid stops them and says she'll go ahead to check things out first, asking them to please wait. Cornelia flashes a bright smile, reassuring her that she's totally fine and ready to go. But as they start to follow the maid inside, the atmosphere suddenly gets a little tense. Out of nowhere, Prince Leonhardt grabs Cornelia's wrist tightly and tells her to wait. Startled by his sudden grip, Cornelia turns back and asks Prince Leonhardt what's wrong. Prince Leonhardt looks really worried, sweating, as he realizes he saw this exact same scene happen during the 6th loop. Prince Leonhardt remembers his 6th visit, explaining that a girl named Lynette Leicester went missing early that morning, so he went to her family's estate to search for her. As Cornelia listens closely with a worried look, the prince suddenly stops her and asks her to wait right there. Then, we see a woman walking very unsteadily and crying so hard that she looks like she might completely collapse. Her husband is carefully holding on to her to keep her up, so the pair are moving forward super slowly, and it is honestly heartbreaking to watch. Cornelia watches them from a distance, wondering what on earth could have happened. Out of nowhere, the crying woman's husband begs Prince Leonhardt to lend them the help of the royal doctors, sobbing that their daughter is currently down by the lake. He pieces things together and remembers that Lynette apparently went into the western forest all by herself and threw herself into the deep lake, though he only found out about this sad detail much later. But Cornelia finds it incredibly hard to believe, pointing out that until literally yesterday, Lynette was super excited for today, and that truth shouldn't change no matter how many times this loop repeats itself. She starts to wonder if maybe some other awful tragedy hit the Lastance family, and Lynette is just suffering and grieving because of that instead. But Prince Leonhardt explains that the Lastance family took the shortest available route this time, with their guards already with them, so even if something bad did happen on the road, there is no way Lynette could have known about it all the way over library at the Leicester estate, though he is honestly unsure of what a royal doctor can actually do for Lynette at this point. Prince Leonhardt says he'll head straight back to the palace to arrange one anyway. He adds that while he's deeply worried about the girl, he also believes it's simply for the best to have a doctor right by the devastated parent's side. Cornelia agrees that having a doctor nearby would make everyone feel a lot better, especially since Lynette's parents seemed so shaken up. Prince Leonhardt adds that he is also going to let his father know about everything that is happening. As he gets ready to head out, the prince promises Cornelia to ask his father to help with any requests from the Leicester family, telling her he will see her later at the evening party. Later that night, the grand evening party begins with a live orchestra playing smooth classical music in the background. Cornelia stands among a group of ladies, feeling relieved that nobody is talking about Lynette, but she knows that in just a few hours, everyone will completely forget the truth anyway. She realizes how heartbreaking it is for Lynette's parents to keep repeating this loop and suffering over and over, while also eventually learning about the tragic fates of the Lastance couple and Hugo Emmert. Cornelia starts wondering if this loop is repeating the absolute worst day in the lives of Lynette's family, where every single misfortune just happened to line up. She tries to make sense of it all, wondering if the entire reason they are stuck repeating today is because all these terrible events overlapped at once. But right in the middle of her deep thoughts, someone suddenly grabs her hand with a strong grip. She looks up in surprise to find Prince Leonhardt, who looks really worried and urgently tells her they need to go right away. Cornelia asks if something happened, but the prince doesn't have time to explain right now and just insists that she follow him. As they rush off, a worried Cornelia gasps and asks if something happened to the Lastances, but Prince Leonhardt reassures her that the family actually arrived safely in the capital and is already at the evening party. But Cornelia is still utterly confused as to why the prince dragged her away so suddenly. Just then, a young guard introduces himself to them as Hugo Emmert, explaining that he works for the Lastance family. Now, Cornelia and Leonhardt sit side by side on an elegant sofa. looking serious as they prepare themselves for the next loop. Hugo clarifies that he actually serves as a guard for the Rustance family, setting the record straight. He then mentions that Prince Leonhardt told him how Cornelia had been wanting to meet up with him. Hugo is quite curious about the whole thing, politely asking Cornelia where exactly she first heard about him. Cornelia smiles brightly and explains that she actually heard all about him from Miss Lynette earlier. She adds that just the other day, Lynette was super happy telling her that Hugo would be traveling with the Rustance couple. Hearing this, Hugo grips his chest, looking completely downcast as he quietly processes that Lynette was the one who mentioned him. Seeing his sad reaction, Cornelia stays quiet, looking pretty concerned about what is going on. Hugo suddenly snaps out of it with a gasp, realizing she meant Lady Lynette and trying to play it cool. But the mood is totally ruined, and Hugo apologizes to Cornelia and Prince Leonhardt before quickly making his excuses to leave. As he gets ready to leave, Hugo tells them that he really needs to return to Lynette and the Leicesters. He admits he is not sure what he can even do to help, but he feels strongly that he should at least be by their side right now. Hearing how much he cares, Cornelia instantly feels bad and apologizes for holding him up, telling him to quickly go back to them. Cornelia walks with Lord Leonhard and asks him to go home for the night, promising that she will handle the situation from here on out. Hugo bows and apologizes once more for leaving so suddenly, asking if they can forgive him and let him give a proper greeting some other day. Cornelia graciously tells him not to worry about it at all, warmly suggesting that they should all have tea together with Miss Lynette when the time comes. Prince Leonhard turns to Cornelia and sincerely apologizes for pulling her away so suddenly without giving her any explanation. He mentions that he originally noticed the Rustance couple in the hall, and when he went over to say hello, he was completely surprised to find Hugo standing right beside them. Since he figured Cornelia would want a chance to meet and speak with Hugo, he quickly stepped in to hold him back before he could leave. Prince Leonhard confesses he was so flustered that he couldn't explain things earlier, but Cornelia happily thanks him for calling her over, really glad she got to speak with Hugo. The prince smiles and says he is truly glad he was able to face Hugo and speak with him properly too. But then, Prince Leonhardt rubs his head and asks Cornelia to forgive him, admitting he has become a bit of a coward because of how things went last today. Cornelia smiles warmly and gently reminds him that everyone has fears and anxieties, and keeping those feelings bottled up inside only makes things more painful. So she asks him to please stop putting up a brave front whenever he is alone with her. Hearing her sweet words, Prince Leonhard smiles softly and sincerely thanks her. Looking down at his pocket watch, he mentions that it is about time to announce the end of their engagement, asking if they should head back to the hall right now. But Cornelia immediately speaks up and asks him not to talk about calling off their engagement as if it were just some minor detail. Prince Leonhard realizes she is right, admitting with a small sigh that with everything going on, making the announcement had started to feel like just another chore on his to-do list. Leonhard agrees and sincerely apologizes, admitting she is totally right and that he should not have treated the announcement of their broken engagement like a minor detail. He smiles and playfully fires back, asking Cornelia if she wasn't also giving really half-hearted answers when he broke off their engagement during the 6th time loop. Cornelia is completely caught off guard by this, looking totally shocked that he brought it up. But Cornelia tells him not to worry, since it is already in the past, or rather, it is from a version of today that has completely vanished, meaning nobody else even remembers it. She reminds him that there isn't a single bit of proof left, and that the two of them are literally the only ones in the world who even remember it happened. Hearing her turn the tables on him so easily, Prince Leonhard just chuckles and complains that she's being totally unfair. All around them, the party guests are whispering about how close the two of them look and how wonderful they are together. Hearing the whispers, Prince Leonhard sighs, realizing the mood is way too positive for them to bring up ending their engagement without causing a scene. He softly asks Cornelia to forgive him and begs her to stay by his side as his fiancée just until today ends, to which she happily agrees. Cornelia is caught off guard when he suddenly reaches out his hand toward her. With a warm smile, Prince Leonhard offers to escort her through the party since they are already there together. Cornelia beams with happiness and places her hand in his, telling him she would absolutely love that. She reflects on how announcing the end of their engagement tonight would normally throw the party into total chaos, even though everyone accepted it without much fuss before. She walks side by side with Lord Leonhard, admitting that before these endless time loops started, she felt absolutely nothing when he broke things off, proving just how distant they really were. To both of them, their arrangement was never about love. They were simply playing the roles of the future king and the future queen candidate. But as Cornelia looks at him now, she can't help but feel like things between them are starting to change. As she details the strange memories of the previous loops, she wonders if she is truly the only one who can recall what happened. Later on, after the days pass without Cornelia ever bringing up their broken engagement, Lord Leonhard visits the Carnan house under the starry night sky and asks her to listen to him calmly. Out of nowhere, Cornelia gets some absolutely terrifying news. A young man named Hugo has passed away, which completely shocks her because he was just at the evening party. She looks at Prince Leonhard in total disbelief and asks how this could have possibly happened, but the prince just looks away in heavy silence. The prince explains that after leaving them, Hugo tried to head back to the Leicester estate with the Rustons couple, but on the way, their carriage hit a rock and stopped. Cornelia is completely heartbroken and wonders who on earth would want to do something so awful to Hugo, but the prince admits they still have no idea. He goes on to say that the person who attacked Hugo didn't even care about the driver or the Leicesters inside the carriage, and the killer vanished into thin air right after leaving Hugo dead. Hearing this terrifying detail makes Cornelia shiver as she looks up at Prince Leonhard, realizing just how dangerous and targeted the attack really was. Prince Leonhard looks incredibly serious, explaining that whoever killed Hugo must have been targeting him from the very beginning, meaning he didn't stand a chance of making it through the night. But somehow, dawn breaks once more, and a brand new day begins, just like it's the most normal thing in the world. Cornelia wakes up back in her room as the loop resets, greeting Hilda, while the maid naturally brings up the evening party scheduled for later. But Cornelia just smiles and pops up from behind, happily saying she's super excited for the party because it's been a while since she last saw Prince Leonhard, which completely catches Hilda off guard. With all her memories of the past loops intact, Cornelia playfully tells Hilda she won't survive long if she gets surprised this easily. Hilda can only watch her with a super confused and nervous smile, wondering what on earth is going on with her lady today. Cornelia admits to herself that thinking about what happened last time makes her feel down, but she knows she can't stay depressed because she needs to keep her heart strong today. Remembering how Leonhard was eagerly looking forward to seeing how she would shock him on this 10th loop, she prepares her next moves. Hoping to throw everyone off, Cornelia happily decides to go for a horse ride first and tells the maid to have a horse ready. Later that night, outside the castle, Cornelia is hiding in the bushes waiting for Prince Leonhard. The prince suddenly spots her and remarks that he successfully found where she was hiding. Later on, Leonhard finds Cornelia outside and asks if she was looking for him, but she says she is totally fine and asks why he is there instead. Prince Leonhard admits he wants to avoid going inside the venue because his father and Martis are both in there. Cornelia smiles brightly and asks him how he spent his own day today. She proudly explains that she tied her curtains and bed sheets together to build a rope so she could climb right out of her window, leaving him completely shocked. Prince Leonhard can only sweat drop, calling it a pretty bold move and figuring she must have startled some people. Cornelia sheepishly explains she was planning to report in only after finishing her climb down, since actually showing him how she did it might worry him. As it turns out, two servants were inside talking about replacing the guest room furniture when they saw a cloth slide down the window, followed by Cornelia herself descending right past them. Cornelia looks a bit embarrassed about her crazy escape and admits those poor servants must have gotten quite a shock. Prince Leonhard is desperately trying not to laugh, so Cornelia playfully tells him that holding it in is bad for his health and he should just let it out. Wiping away a happy tear, Prince Leonhard laughs and weakly says he really wishes he could have seen her flying past the window himself. Cornelia just smiles warmly and jokes that if the loop finally ends and tomorrow actually comes, she is going to hold him completely responsible. She continues with a big grin, teasingly suggesting that when that happens, he can always try threatening her into doing her wild window escape all over again. Prince Leonhard happily accepts the blame and matches her playful tone, promising that he will make sure to get some high-quality cloth ready for her next big climb. Prince Leonhard smiles and asks her why she would even try such a crazy thing. Cornelia explains that she read about it in a book during her 5th time reliving today. The story's main character was trapped and escaped by tying curtains together, so Cornelia was just too curious and had to see if it actually worked. Loving her resourcefulness, Prince Leonhard jokes that maybe he will copy her idea and try using the curtains tonight. Cornelia laughs and asks Prince Leonhard how he spent his own day during this loop. The prince is a bit surprised, but tells her that after a quick bowl of tomato soup, he spent his time training with swords. Leonhard admits he lost the duel again and got compared to Martis, which made him so mad that he kicked the guy down and lunged right at him. He smiles and asks what she did after that, while a very confused Cornelia looks up and wonders if he means above them. Cornelia is absolutely shocked that he climbed onto the roof, but Leonhardt casually explains he had already scouted out a path up there a while ago. Even though Cornelia warns him that it's super dangerous, Leonhardt says he used a rope as a lifeline just in case, adding that the footing was steady, the wind felt great, and it had the absolute best view. So, while standing up there with paint buckets, he decided to paint a massive white bird on the roof, one so big that no normal canvas could ever hold it. Hearing this high-climbing story, Cornelia can only stare in disbelief and ask him about the painting. They chat happily under the stars, and Cornelia smiles, saying it is such a waste that the painting cannot be seen, even though he went through all the trouble of making it. But Prince Leonhardt just smiles and says it does not matter at all, because once tomorrow finally comes, he plans to jump into a hot air balloon just to get a good look at it from above. Cornelia is surprised by the balloon idea, but Prince Leonhardt explains that after punching his instructor, forcing her down from the curtains, and calling off their engagement, he has really crossed the line. With the king incredibly angry in the background, Prince Leonhardt happily admits he is bound to get disowned after all that, which is exactly why he needs to escape in a hot air balloon. Hearing this, Cornelia gets a totally serious look on her face as a sudden, shocking realization starts to hit her. She begins to wonder if the real reason Prince Leonhardt brought up calling off their engagement in the first place was actually for her sake. Looking back, Prince Leonhardt confronted Cornelia Carnan in the past and told her very bluntly that they were not a good match, meaning he was calling off their engagement. During that previous time loop, Cornelia begged him to wait and asked if she had done something wrong, though deep down she knew that couldn't be the reason. She even asked him if there was someone else he wanted to marry instead, but he quickly told her that wasn't the case either. Looking pretty troubled, Prince Leonhardt simply insisted that they just weren't a match and claimed there was nothing more to it. Back during that fifth time loop, Cornelia still didn't really understand what he was thinking, only feeling that he didn't seem like the type of guy to make such a sudden decision. But things are different this time around, because living through these loops has helped her truly understand who he is as a person. Cornelia looks back on her 10th loop of the day, which she originally planned to just spend however she wanted, but she decides she absolutely cannot back down right now. In her memories, Prince Leonhardt insists that they simply are not a good match, though Cornelia is determined to get the full story out of him first. Back then, she could only look at him with deep confusion and sadness, completely lost as to why he was doing this. Looking back, that tense moment in front of the entire whispering ballroom was when her 10th loop really took a turn. But with a confident smile, Cornelia tells herself that this 10th loop isn't over yet, and she's ready to change the outcome. Outside under the bright full moon, the sound of galloping horses echoes as a carriage rides away from the palace. Prince Leonhardt is standing in the palace garden under the night sky when he hears someone call out his name from behind. Leonhardt looks at Cornelia in surprise and asks if she actually came all the way out here on her own. Cornelia just warmly greets him, and Prince Leonhardt can barely believe his eyes, asking if she actually rode here on a horse. Prince Leonhardt admits he never expected to be surprised in a place like this, but Cornelia laughs it off and says it was just a nice night walk. Getting straight to the point, Cornelia gets serious and says she wants to talk about the Rustons family and Miss Lynette this time around. A flashback shows a brave knight clashing swords with an intruder as news comes in that a group of thieves broke into the Rustons' estate earlier at dawn. He explains that while the guards rushed over and caught the intruders, a man named Hugo was unfortunately killed during the fight. Cornelia is completely shocked to hear this, but Prince Leonhardt confirms it, adding that he even told the guards to look into the possibility that Hugo was the actual target, but since they have not made any progress by this late hour, he admits the whole truth will probably remain a mystery. Prince Leonhardt then mentions that Miss Lynette was acting pretty strange this time around too, remarking how weird it is that something always seems to happen when she is nearby. He goes on to say that she apparently headed off toward the forest in the west this time. Because of that, he was really worried that she might try to end her own life, just like she did last time. He mentions that this time, Lynette didn't actually make it all the way to the lake because she screamed something halfway there, and the Lester family guards dragged her back to the manor. Hearing this, Cornelia ponders the detail about the western forest, remembering that was exactly where Lynette tried to end her life before, even if she came back without reaching the water this time. It leaves Cornelia completely puzzled, and she can't help but wonder what Lynette was really trying to do. Her choices make absolutely no sense to anyone else, yet she seems to be desperately trying to go somewhere every single time. Whether she is turning back halfway, vanishing completely, or even trying to end her own life, everything she does is totally unpredictable. But even if her actions seem completely bizarre to everyone watching, she must have her own secret goal in mind. Cornelia thought Lynette might have been trying to meet up with the Rustons couple, but she realizes that theory does not quite add up, She explains to Prince Leonhardt that if that really was the goal, Lynette's actual behavior this time completely contradicts everything. Prince Leonhardt admits he was probably wrong about his guess, sighing that they are just dealing with one massive, confusing mystery after another between this endless loop and Lynette's wild actions. Cornelia quietly agrees that it is a lot to take in, but Prince Leonhardt smiles warmly and reassures her that he truly believes they are finally moving closer to solving everything. His confidence shines through as he tells her that even without any proof, he is absolutely certain they will reach tomorrow soon, and they will go way further than that. Back in the present, Cornelia looks at him with soft, hopeful eyes and gently says his name, Lord Leonhard. But as Cornelia looks ahead, she can't help but worry about what actually lies in that future. Even if they somehow make it to tomorrow, she remembers how many times she had to hear those awful words about their engagement being broken, and she looks at Prince Leonhard, wondering if their relationship is just doomed. She knows it might be a really painful topic for him to talk about right now, but she decides she absolutely has to ask him anyway. Mustering up her courage, Cornelia looks him dead in the eye and asks why he told her he was breaking off their engagement in the first place. Prince Leonhardt just stands there in complete silence, looking totally caught off guard by her sudden question. Finally, he looks away with a sad smile and claims it is simply because the two of them are not a good match, insisting that is all there is to it. Cornelia is completely taken aback and immediately asks him what he means by them not being a match. Prince Leonhardt looks down and sadly explains that he is actually the one who is not good enough for her. This sudden confession shatters Cornelia's understanding, leaving her completely stunned as memories of their past loops flash through her mind like broken glass. Prince Leonhardt gives a soft, somewhat painful smile and wonders aloud where he should even begin his explanation. Looking at him with absolute seriousness, Cornelia pleads with him to tell her absolutely everything he is able to share. He takes a breath and starts by pointing out how the right to the throne always goes to the oldest son, which Cornelia says she already knows. Prince Leonhard explains that the kingdom has a strict succession rule that has been upheld throughout their long history. He says the only exceptions are if the eldest son gets into a terrible accident or commits some massive crime, making it basically impossible for anyone else to take the throne. But Prince Leonhard smiles and confesses that he has always actually wanted to yield the throne to his brother Martis. Even though he is the elder brother, he admits it is only by birth and believes Martis is far more talented and deserves to be the king. However, no matter how many times Prince Leonhard brought this up with the king, his father simply refused to take him seriously. Hearing this, Cornelia looks shocked and asks if that is the real reason why he always broke off their engagement at the evening party. Prince Leonhard explains his plan, saying he wanted to publicly break off their engagement so his father would be forced to reconsider who inherits the throne. He believed that since everyone already knew Martis was the more capable brother, no one would object to the change. Cornelia agrees that Lord Martis is indeed an amazing person, but she adds that neither Martis nor the citizens ever wanted Leonhard to lose his rightful place as the future king. Leonhard smiles confidently and says he is sure everyone would support him taking the throne just as he is, especially with Martis and her by his side, which she warmly agrees with. She even reveals that both she and Lord Martis had been working hard this whole time, fully intending to support him with everything they had once he became king. Prince Leonhard acknowledges that Cornelia and his brother have put in some serious effort, but he urges her to think about the bigger picture. He questions why he should even be the leader of the country if he constantly needs both of them to prop him up. But when Leonhard adds that it would be best for the country if the two of them ruled together as king and queen, Cornelia gets representingly flustered and tries to object. The prince explains that royalty is meant to put the happiness of the people first, and that is exactly why he is choosing to give up his spot. Cornelia looks at him, totally heartbroken, and softly asks if he is doing all of this just because he is royalty. With a gentle smile, Prince Leonhard confirms that this is simply his pride as a member of the royal family and as the first prince. He explains that while he might not match Martis in other areas, his love for the country and its people is second to none, which is why he wants his brother on the throne. Cornelia looks at him, totally shocked, and asks Prince Leonhard what he plans to do with his own life if he actually goes through with this. Prince Leonhard just smiles and tells Cornelia that once Martis takes over and proposes to her again, everything will work out perfectly, so she shouldn't worry about him at all. But Cornelia is still super worried, pointing out that he won't even be allowed to stay in the palace once his rights to the throne are completely taken away. Prince Leonhard admits he probably won't face any terrible punishment like execution or complete exile, but he still has a different plan. He confesses that he honestly has no desire to stay in the royal palace anyway, and he'd much rather be kicked out and live a simple, quiet life than stay somewhere he isn't comfortable. Cornelia looks surprised and asks Prince Leonhardt if his big plan is to just fly away somewhere in a hot air balloon, and he happily smiles and tells her that is exactly it. Leonhardt looks back with a sad smile, apologizing for keeping secrets and explaining that he had actually planned to paint a bird on the roof before getting kicked out, wanting to take a long look at it and go far away. Cornelia looks down sadly, realizing she never tried to actually understand Prince Leonhardt before entering this time loop, but now she finally knows what he is really like. She realizes she finally sees the real him, beyond his royal title. She now sees his kindness, his reliability, his gentleness, and his amazing positivity. With her eyes shadowed with worry, Cornelia softly begs him to please reconsider his plan to leave everything behind. She gets super emotional and promises that if he is scared of ruling the country, she will support him, not just as a supporting queen, but by standing right beside him as his equal. Cornelia looks him straight in the eye and says that if they join forces right now, she is sure they can make the country a much better place. Hearing this, Prince Leonhardt looks completely taken aback and asks her if she really intends to go through with this loop of hers. But then, his expression tightens and he begs Cornelia to stop talking. Cornelia is left speechless, wanting to say more but holding her tongue. Prince Leonhardt turns away and asks her that if she truly cares for him, to please let him see his decision through, before apologizing and offering to call a carriage so she can head back to the Carnan estate since it is getting so late. By the time morning rolls around, Cornelia is greeted back at her estate. Cornelia is back in her room getting ready, and her maid is super excited about the party happening tonight. The maid turns around with a smile and reminds Cornelia that it has been quite a while since she last saw Prince Leonhardt. Cornelia agrees, but clutching her chest, she knows she cannot just sit around and cry over this heartache, realizing she needs to break free from this repeating cycle of today and finally reach tomorrow. She knows that no matter what kind of future comes next, Prince Leonhardt is going to break off his engagement with her, lose his right to the throne, and walk his very own path. Just like a bird painted on a roof flying high into the sky, he is heading toward tomorrow and the future that lies ahead. So Cornelia clenches her fist and looks determined, saying she has a future of her own too, and it is entirely up to her to make that future a bright one. During breakfast, Cornelia overhears a rumor that the young lady of the Lester family isn't feeling well. The women at the table talk about how terrible it is and wonder what could have happened to her. Hearing this, Cornelia realizes that Lynette must still be at her family's estate, and she wonders what she could be doing there. She tries to figure out if Lynette is simply staying home on her own, or if she's actually locked in her room while trying to sneak out somewhere. Cornelia admits to herself that she doesn't fully understand everything Lynette does within each time loop. She runs through all the wild things Lynette has done before, from running away on a horse and suddenly vanishing, to bursting into the party or even trying to jump into the lake. But Cornelia can't shake the feeling that she's overlooking something critical, especially since the bad luck is hitting absolutely everyone right now, not just Lynette and her family. Sitting in front of her mirror, Cornelia wonders if she should actively change things up and go somewhere right away, but she has absolutely no idea where to go or what to do. Then she starts to think that maybe just leaving and doing things randomly is the actual problem, realizing she'll totally lose track of her goals if she completely locks herself away from the world. This reminds her of what Prince Leonhardt said, about how things won't just solve themselves, but overthinking everything isn't going to help either. Remembering their conversation by the water, Cornelia had told Prince Leonhardt that she really wanted to apologize for bringing up something totally unnecessary the other night. She felt bad for ignoring his feelings and basically forcing her own wishes onto him, especially with everything chaotic going on around them. Cornelia looks down sadly, apologizing and begging him to please just forget everything she said the other night. But Prince Leonhardt immediately smiles and tells her not to apologize, because hearing her true feelings actually made him really happy. Cornelia is completely taken aback, softly murmuring his name in surprise. Prince Leonhardt happily explains that he has always super admired her, and she was the main reason he worked so hard to be worthy of standing by her side. Hearing this, Cornelia is totally confused and asks him why on earth he would still break off their engagement if he felt that way. Prince Leonhardt just smiles gently and says that breaking it off was actually precisely because of how much he admired her. He admits he knows just how hard she always worked and what a wonderful woman she is, which made him feel like he was never a good match for her. Leonhardt insists it is not Cornelia's fault at all, admitting he just lacked the courage to face her and started to hesitate. Hearing this, Cornelia wonders if they can put this whole matter on hold for now. She explains that while she is the one who brought it up, resolving this loop is their main priority right now. So she asks if they can just pause what she said the other night and try to treat each other like they used to. Leonhardt smiles softly and repeats the idea, thinking over the thought of keeping things on hold. Leonhardt completely agrees with this plan, knowing that they can only start building a real future once they finally break the endless cycle and reach tomorrow. Cornelia asks Leonhardt what his next move is for the rest of today, and he explains that his first stop is the Western Forest. After his forest search, he plans to pay a visit to the Lester estate and try talking to Lynette's friends one more time to gather clues. Leonhardt promises to see her at the evening party later, and right on cue, Cornelia arrives at the grand estate, where the worried head of the household rushes out to greet her. The middle-aged noble welcomes her inside, but sadly explains that Lynette is sleeping, as the doctor said it is best for her to get some rest. Hearing this, Cornelia realizes she cannot speak with her friend right now, so she politely says goodbye and decides to take her leave. The middle-aged noble apologizes, looking really worried that Cornelia came all this way for nothing. But Cornelia smiles and tells him not to worry, gently asking him to let Lynette know they should talk once she wakes up and calms down. As she heads back to her carriage, Cornelia remembers that during this 8th loop, she has spent her time talking to Lynette's friends. But no matter who she asks, everyone just keeps telling her how excited Lynette was for the party tonight. Except, one of the friends mentions something different, prompting a curious Cornelia to ask if she could share a little more about that. The twin-tailed noblewoman happily smiles and says she would be glad to. Meanwhile, Cornelia walks down the stairs with her mother, reflecting on how Lynette was genuinely excited for today, which was more than enough to put a smile on everyone's face. The twin-tailed noblewoman happily explains how Lynette even twirled around in excitement while showing off the dress she planned to wear to the party. Cornelia is completely shocked to hear Lynette was so high-spirited, as she always thought of her as a much quieter person. The twin-tailed noblewoman giggles, remembering how Lynette was basically counting down the days on her calendar while already dressed up, making all the maids laugh. But this doesn't sit right with Cornelia, so she asks why Lynette was looking forward to tonight's party so much, leaving the twin-tailed noblewoman totally confused. Cornelia points out that while the royal family's party is bound to be a grand event, she still wonders if Lynette really loved parties all that much. Cornelia walks away thinking that she could understand Lynette being excited if this were her very first big party in the capital after coming from the countryside. But since Lynette is the daughter of a marquise, none of that actually makes sense, leaving Cornelia to wonder why she, of all people, was looking forward to tonight's event and the daily visits from the last dances. That's when the twin-tailed noblewoman chimes in to say that tonight's party is actually super special for Lynette, making Cornelia instantly ask if there is some kind of secret going on. The twin-tailed noblewoman leans in close with a bright smile, asking Cornelia to keep it a secret, and Cornelia quickly agrees to listen. As it turns out, the friend reveals that Lynette was planning to be escorted by her fiancé at tonight's party, which completely shocks Cornelia because she had absolutely no idea Lynette even had a fiancé. The twin-tailed noblewoman happily explains that while nothing is officially announced just yet, Lynette has definitely been seeing someone with the intention of marriage. The twin-tailed noblewoman begs Cornelia to keep all of this a secret, and Cornelia quickly agrees that she understands. But Cornelia can't help but worry, wondering if this partner who is supposed to escort Lynette for the first time could actually be a certain someone she knows. To find out, she asks if the fiancé is indeed Hugo, and the twin-tailed noblewoman happily confirms that he is. She explains that Hugo Emmert, who works as a guard for the Last Dance family, has actually been secretly dating Lynette for years. Hearing this unbelievable news, Cornelia is completely shocked and frozen in place. Realizing the massive trouble this could cause, she knows she has to get in her carriage and tell Lord Leonhardt about this right away. Cornelia is dealing with some pretty shocking news as she realizes that Lynette and Hugo have actually been in love this entire time. But since Hugo's family has served her family as guards for generations, it is definitely a relationship across very different social classes. Because Lynette is an only child, most families who care a lot about noble status would normally freak out about her marrying a simple guard. Looking back, both the Last Dance and Lester families were incredibly pleased with the couple's relationship and happily welcomed their bright future together. Since he does not have the noble status, Hugo was never invited to these fancy events before, but tonight, he was finally supposed to attend as her official lover. The pieces finally connect for Cornelia, and she realizes that this secret romance is exactly why Hugo gets targeted and ends up dead in every single time loop. Cornelia realizes that before this loop, Hugo usually died while trying to defend his masters, sometimes even sacrificing himself to protect them during some sudden attack. But the 5th time loop was totally different because he was just tending to his horse in the stable when someone came out of nowhere and stabbed him to death, making it clear he was the target all along. During the 9th and 10th loops, Hugo was the only one who ended up dead, and Cornelia actually remembers talking to him when he came to the party. Looking closely at the rose stitched onto his chest, Cornelia realizes Lynette must have made that embroidery herself, meaning they were truly meant to stand side by side as a couple. Then she remembers that there was actually one loop where Lynette made it to the party, and she wonders if that happened during the 8th cycle. But in the 9th loop, Lynette tried to end her own life super early on, even though Hugo still showed up at the party. Cornelia remembers that in the 10th time loop, Hugo ended up dying in a mutual fight to the death with a thief who broke in early in the morning. She gets super worried trying to piece everything together, but suddenly, she is startled out of her thoughts by a loud rattling sound right outside her carriage. Out of nowhere, one of the family guards in a white uniform runs up to the carriage to check on things. Cornelia leans out the window and asks him where Lord Leonhardt is, saying she has something really important to discuss with him. Hearing that Lord Leonhardt is currently meeting with the head of the Last Dance family, Cornelia's eyes go wide in shock as she wonders why on earth they would be here. She points out they were supposed to head straight to the Lester estate, but the guard explains that since the head of the Lastons family loves hunting and got to the capital early, he decided to drop by, while his wife stopped to see a friend. When Cornelia mentions Hugo, the guard is totally confused, wondering how she even knows about their family guard, Hugo Emmert. He mentions that Hugo actually went deep into the forest with Lord Leonhardt and some others, which makes Cornelia gasp in pure shock. Realizing they might be in serious trouble, Cornelia throws open the carriage door and rushes out as fast as she can. Out of nowhere, she runs straight into Lord Leonhardt himself, who is standing with his men, and asks her in total surprise what she is doing there. Sobbing with relief, Cornelia grabs onto him, crying out how thankful she is that he is safe, and saying she doesn't know what she would have done if anything happened to him. Leonhardt holds her gently by the shoulders, completely bewildered by her tears, but softly reassures her that he is perfectly fine, and begs her to calm down. Cornelia desperately explains that she ran into the woods just to tell him something, but panicked when she heard Hugo was with him. Leonhardt tries to soothe her worries, gently pointing out his men standing nearby, and assuring her that nothing bad has happened yet. Hearing this, Cornelia lets out a massive sigh of relief and smiles, finally able to calm down. But out of nowhere, Leonhardt suddenly pulls her close and yells at her not to look. Completely shielding her view, he covers Cornelia's eyes with his hand and tells her to just stay still. Flustered and shivering in his tight hold, Cornelia begs Leonhardt to tell her what is going on. Back in her room, Cornelia sits quietly by candlelight, looking deeply troubled by the crazy events of the night. Because of everything that happened, she ends up skipping the big evening banquet entirely while she tries to calm her mind. To help her relax, a maid sets down a nice warm cup of lemonade for her, which Cornelia politely accepts. The maid, Hilda, looks incredibly worried and asks why something so awful had to happen, begging her guest not to let it get to her. But Cornelia just gives her a gentle, reassuring smile and tells Hilda that it is totally fine, insisting she did not actually see a thing. Even though she acts calm on the outside, Cornelia keeps telling herself that in that terrifying moment, she really did not see anything. Lord Leonhardt holds Cornelia close and guides her away from the scene, leading her back to their carriage while draping his coat over her shoulders. Once inside, Cornelia just sits there on her own, trembling all over as she waits in silence. Later on, Leonhardt breaks the awful news to a deeply shocked Cornelia, explaining that a hunting rifle misfired and a stray bullet hit Hugo Emmert right in the head. But as awful as it is, Cornelia can't help but feel relieved that Lynette didn't go to the Western Forest this time, since she would have had to witness her fiancé's sudden, tragic end. Lynette is already in such a fragile state of mind that losing her partner like this would have been a totally devastating blow. Even if Lynette couldn't fully process the fact that Hugo is gone, Cornelia feels it is simply a heartbreaking and incredibly cruel situation all around. In the previous timeline, Hugo actually lost his life shortly after leaving the Northern Territory, and he never even made it to the Western Forest. So because their movements didn't line up back then, their moments of bad luck never overlapped either. Thinking about this, Cornelia gets a bad feeling and realizes something is deeply bothering her about the whole situation. Wondering if Lord Leonhardt knows more about what is going on, she suddenly calls for her maid Hilda and demands she get the carriage ready. Hilda thinks it is a bad idea to rush to the royal palace so late and suggests waiting until tomorrow. But Cornelia raises her voice and says tomorrow might never come. But just as she says that, the door suddenly bursts open, and Lord Leonhardt himself rushes into the room, calling out Cornelia's name. Lord Leonhardt looks completely panicked as he bursts in, immediately asking Cornelia if she's all right and if something bad happened. Out of nowhere, Cornelia rushes up to a very surprised Leonhardt, desperately pleading with him to calm down, as she has something incredibly important to talk about. Hearing this, Lord Leonhard is momentarily surprised, realizing there is no immediate emergency requiring a rescue. He lets out a massive sigh of relief and brushes his hair back, apologizing for completely losing his cool now that he knows she is perfectly safe. As they sit down together, he explains that the banquet is actually going smoothly, and although some people noticed a couple of families are missing, nobody seems suspicious. Cornelia still worries that he might be pushing himself way too hard, but he just smiles and insists he is doing perfectly fine. He adds that his parents are keeping things under control because they fully understand the situation, while Martis is doing a great job handling some of his other royal duties as well. With that reassurance out of the way, Lord Leonhardt turns to Cornelia and asks what she wanted to tell him. Cornelia starts by asking if he happens to know Olivia Listel, the daughter of Count Listel, and he replies that he has spoken with her a couple of times. Cornelia explains that since Olivia was super close with Lynette, she went over to ask her for more information, hoping to gather some useful details. She admits she found it really strange and curious why Lynette was looking forward to tonight's banquet so much. Lord Leonhardt agrees that it is pretty weird, pointing out that Lynette has already been to plenty of royal banquets and parties before. Cornelia explains that she asked Olivia for answers and found out Lynette kept saying tonight's banquet was super special, which immediately catches Lord Leonhardt's attention. It turns out Lynette had big plans to be escorted by her fiancé tonight and finally introduce him to high society. Hearing this, Lord Leonhardt starts putting the pieces together, realizing that Lynette actually had a fiancé this whole time. Then, a sudden, shocking realization hits him as he gasps, wondering who this fiancé could actually be. Cornelia reveals that the fiancé is Hugo Emmert, explaining that he and Lynette had been seeing each other for years and were going to make it official tonight. Lord Leonhard looks completely stunned, realizing that this perfectly explains why Hugo became a target in the first place. It all goes back to a massive, long-standing fight over land owned by the Lastance family, who had no children of their own and just couldn't figure out who should take over. So the couple planned to adopt one of Lynette's future children to hand the land down to, but things got complicated when they started thinking about what would happen if she actually married Hugo. Cornelia thought this land plan was just some vague idea, but now she realizes it was moving forward pretty quickly behind the scenes. And that is exactly why Hugo kept getting targeted in each and every one of these time loops. To anyone who wants to steal the Lastance land, Hugo is the biggest roadblock standing in their way. Cornelia used to wonder why a simple guard like him was in so much danger, but now absolutely everything finally connects. But right as she is piecing it all together, a strange, muffled sound catches her ear and totally startles her. Seeing her tense up, the blonde prince gets worried and asks Cornelia what is wrong. Cornelia looks back at him and asks if he just heard a voice too, but he is totally confused and says nobody should even be out there. He mentions there is only a gardener's tool shed nearby, but as they both peer out the window, Cornelia suddenly gasps because she recognizes the voice as Lynette's. Sure enough, Cornelia spots a woman standing right outside the window of the dark shed. But before Cornelia can do anything, the woman suddenly turns and starts running away, leaving Cornelia calling out for Lynette to wait. Lord Leonhardt keeps calling out, but quickly realizes it is totally useless since Lynette cannot hear them at all. Before Cornelia can even react, he tells her to wait right there and vaults himself straight out the window. Cornelia watches him jump down in absolute shock, calling out Lord Leonhardt's name as he goes after her friend. Looking out at him running into the dark, Cornelia is left wondering what Lynette is up to, remembering how she acted the last time she showed up at a party. Back then, she suddenly burst in out of nowhere, shouting at the top of her lungs, and then ran off as if she was chasing after something. She adds that her husband, Grace, still plans to go and asks Cornelia if she wouldn't mind keeping an eye on him, which Cornelia quickly agrees to. But as she throws open the door, a sudden realization hits Cornelia and she gasps, realization dawning on her that she needs to call someone right away. She quickly spots a maid in the hallway and frantically explains that Lynette appeared outside, and Lord Leonhardt went after her, begging her to call the guards. On top of that, Cornelia tells her to contact the Lester family immediately, and the startled maid quickly promises she will do it. Looking back at the open window, Cornelia can only hope that calling for help will be enough to keep everyone safe. But after standing there in silence for a moment, her worry gets the better of her, and she realizes she cannot just wait around. With a determined look on her face, she rushes out the door to go after them herself. Cornelia runs outside, super worried, and asks Leonhardt if he is doing okay. But meanwhile, Lynette is standing there looking completely blank and empty. Suddenly, she throws a whole bucket of water right onto the side of the shed. Standing outside in the garden together, Leonhardt is completely lost and confused, while Cornelia stares ahead in disbelief, wondering what on earth Lynette is doing. Leonhardt explains that no matter what he says, she won't reply, and she just keeps drawing water and tossing it onto the shed. He watches her carry another bucket, muttering that it is like she's in a world of her own, and wonders what she is actually seeing. Cornelia steps up to the sleepwalking girl, pleading with Lynette to calm down and listen to her. But Lynette completely ignores her, staying totally silent as Cornelia looks on with deep worry. Seeing this, both Leonhardt and Cornelia try yelling out to Lynette, demanding to know what on earth she thinks she is doing as she walks back to the well. Just then, two guards in tall hats rush onto the scene, shouting for them to wait. The guards quickly stand in front of the pair, asking Lady Cornelia and Lord Leonhardt to please step back and leave the rest to them. But the stress of everything becomes too much for Cornelia, and she begins to collapse as a worried Leonhardt holds her up and asks if she is all right. Cornelia admits that she only started to relax a bit once the guards finally showed up. Leonhardt smiles warmly at her, realizing she was the one who called for help, and thanks her for being so quick to act. Meanwhile, the guards tend to the sleepwalking girl by the well, mentioning they have sent word to her family, the Lesters, who should arrive to collect her shortly. Knowing her family is coming, Cornelia decides she wants to go with Lynette back to the Lester estate, which catches Leonhardt a bit off guard. Cornelia is convinced there has to be some real meaning behind Lynette's strange sleepwalking actions. Leonhardt listens closely as Cornelia adds that she feels like there is something crucial about all of this that she desperately needs to notice. Cornelia explains that she doesn't really get what's going on, which is why she plans to stay by Lynette's side all night and into the next loop. Lord Leonhardt smiles gently and tells her he completely understands. He then reveals his own plan to head to the Northern Territory tomorrow morning, though he warns her to be super careful since they don't know what might happen. Cornelia is completely shocked by his mention of the North, immediately remembering how Lord Leonhardt saw the Last Dance couple and Hugo get caught in a terrible rockfall there. But Lord Leonhardt reassures her, saying they can't just live in fear and that a real tomorrow won't ever come unless they take action. He asks if she agrees, and Cornelia softly nods in agreement. During a quiet moment in the grand family mansion, things are about to take a completely different turn. Cornelia sits quietly beside a sleeping Lynette, wondering what kinds of dreams her sleeping friend is actually seeing. Before leaving the room, the maid lets Cornelia know she is leaving Lynette in her care and tells her she can just call for the hallway guards if she needs anything. Left alone in the quiet room, Cornelia starts looking around and soon notices a book sitting on the bookshelf. Recognizing the book as one she actually owns herself, Cornelia excitedly remembers how the cool protagonist escapes being locked up by sliding down a curtain from the window. She happily recalls that she actually tried the exact same trick once, tying her own curtains and bed sheets together to slide right out of a second-floor window. Sitting by her sleeping friend's bed, Cornelia playfully suggests to Lynette that they should pull off the window escape together next time. She reassures her not to worry about getting in trouble, since Lord Leonhardt promised he would take full responsibility for whatever happens. Cornelia thinks back to how she played it off, smiling as she explains how she used her engagement as leverage and threatened Leonhardt to come along to protect her. But looking closely at Lynette, Cornelia starts to feel uneasy, noticing that her friend seems completely lifeless right now, almost like a quiet doll. Suddenly, a sharp, loud gasp breaks the silence of the room. Out of nowhere, Lynette bolts upright in bed, startling Cornelia so much that she calls out her name in complete shock. Cornelia is completely stunned when Lynette suddenly sits up and tells her to wait. But before Cornelia can do anything, Lynette rushes right out of the room, leaving her to call out in surprise. Her memories drift away, and we see the tall, quiet manor standing still under the dark, starry night sky. The next thing we know, Lynette is galloping away on a horse under the starry night sky. The guards immediately panic and shout to go after her, while Cornelia stands behind them, completely shocked. Desperate to help her friend, Cornelia runs up to one of the mounted guards and orders him to take her along, even though he's hesitant. Cornelia yells at the guard to hurry up, promising that if anything goes wrong, she will take full responsibility. By following her closely, they finally arrive at the western forest they visited earlier that day, but Lynette completely ignores their calls to stop, abandoning her horse and immediately running deep into the woods on foot. Cornelia runs after her through the trees, desperately calling out for her to wait. Exhausted and confused, Cornelia begs Lynette to wait, wondering where on earth she could possibly be going. Just then, Cornelia stops as they reach an opening, surprised to see a large, quiet lake right in front of them. Cornelia catches up only to find a strange, eerie vibe in the air and wonders what is going on. All of a sudden, her body goes weak and she feels her energy completely draining away. With absolutely no strength left to stand, Cornelia collapses straight onto the ground. She desperately reaches a hand out and tries to call for Lynette, who is already wading deep into the lake. Lynette looks back one last time, promising a mysterious person named Hugo that she will definitely save him next time. Suddenly, Cornelia snaps her eyes open, and sits straight up in her bed, completely awake. Waking up from that nightmare, Cornelia sits in bed, utterly confused and wondering what in the world Lynette's cryptic words could have meant. She tries to make sense of what happened to her and Leonhardt in that strange forest during the night. Just then, the maid opens the curtains to greet her, leaving Cornelia to realize that today is indeed the day of the big evening party, exactly as Leonhardt warned her. Leonhardt explains that he always loses consciousness right before the date changes, and even though he knew it would happen, experiencing it himself is still really eerie, but he refuses to stay afraid. Spurred